A stark fact hangs in the air. In every 1,000 people, there are only 2.4 doctors. For Japan, this is the fifth worst ratio among all OECD countries. But even this grim statistic is a luxury compared to Tanzania, where the number is a mere 0.06. A doctor confronts a dragon, wondering what good his skills are here. What can one man do in a place ruled by monsters? The scene changes completely, a young man named Amami apologizing to friends for being late. They greet him as Amami-kun, asking about his hectic day at the clinic. They talk about how long it's been since they were interns, before one asks another, Yamagishi, the reason for this reunion. Yamagishi shocks them with a simple statement: he is going to be a father. Their surprise melts into joy as they eagerly congratulate him. The celebration is planned, but a friend's question about a farewell party for Amami shifts the mood. Amami is visibly confused, asking if he said something strange to prompt such a question. The friend presses, asking about the transfer Amami had mentioned so casually. Amami reveals his destination is Saiwajima, a remote island with no doctor, and he leaves tomorrow. His friend erupts, calling him crazy for throwing away his career at the main hospital. Amami tries to explain it as a career move, but an urgent call from that very hospital interrupts him. He snaps into professional mode, ordering blood units for an emergency operation he must attend to. He explains that his patient, suffering from cirrhosis, is in critical condition and he cannot abandon them. But Yamagishi reveals the truth: he was the one slated for the transfer. Amami volunteered to go in his place. His friends discuss his character, noting he even gave up drinking, something he used to love. They recall a nurse explaining he quit so he'd always be ready for his patients, a level of dedication one friend finds cynically heroic. The friend concludes that everything Amami does, he does for others. In a flashback to the hospital, Amami-sensei takes command to begin the hemostatic process. He orders the team to prepare for an EVL procedure. This is an endoscopic variceal ligation, a specialized treatment for ruptured veins. The scene shifts again to a university building, first at night. Then to daytime, as a conversation about test results begins. Amami is seen with a young patient and her mother, pointing to an X-ray and diagnosing hypophosphatemic rickets. This is a rare bone disorder, explained in a caption. Amami smiles, telling the relieved mother and child that the prescribed medication is working. In the present, two nurses discuss him, one unable to comprehend his selflessness after he stayed overnight for yet another patient. That patient, a little girl named Nanachan, shouts a cheeky, "Thanks a lot, old man." The doctor and the child share a wide, identical grin. The nurses continue their talk. One wishes such a good person would stay in academia, but the other knows he can't. Amami gives his final instructions to Nanachan and her mother, as this is the last time he will see them. Nanachan yells her goodbye, still affectionately calling him old man. A nurse muses that a trip to a doctorless village is a one-way ticket from which he will never return. The same nurse rushes through the hospital corridor, looking for someone. She finds Amami, thanking him one last time for everything he's done. He simply smiles and promises that he will come back one day. On a boat slicing through the water, Amami shouts with joy at the beautiful day. Moments later, he is bent over the railing, violently seasick. The boatman yells over the roar of the sea, asking if his seasickness pills failed him. The grizzled man grumbles about the roughness of the sea and the softness of doctors. Amami arrives at a dirty, cluttered storage room, his new clinic and home. He introduces himself to the islanders, encouraging them to seek him out for any medical issues. They respond in a thick rural dialect that he cannot understand at all. He politely tries to explain his confusion, stating that he is new and can't follow what they're saying. The islanders just stare back at him in stony silence. The boatman intervenes, translating that the villagers are immensely grateful for his arrival. He claps Amami on the back, telling him to relax and that he will learn the lingo eventually. The villagers take their leave, saying they will see him tomorrow after the storm subsides. Amami calls after them, his voice ringing with sincerity, begging them to come to him if they feel sick. Exhausted, he collapses onto the cot in his new room. He lies back, realizing his first major task is to learn this new dialect. He sits up and reaches for a bottle of water from a small, buzzing fridge. Suddenly, a violent impact shakes the entire building to its foundations. The world becomes a blur of splintering wood and chaotic force. He finds himself in a new world, a fantasy landscape with a strange carriage. A close-up reveals the massive, deadly tusk of a wild boar. Armored warriors ride atop these monstrous beasts. A young girl with the ears of a cat is chained behind them, a slave. Her face is etched with pain and utter exhaustion. A guard on the carriage yells for the convoy to halt, having noticed a problem. The cat girl has collapsed, unable to walk any further. The guard approaches, shouting at her to get up. From the carriage, a noble figure orders the guard to ignore it. His voice is cold as he gives the command, "Kill her, for they don't sell defective products." The guard hesitates, muttering about the trouble they went through to capture her. But not wanting to be punished himself, he relents and prepares to carry out the order. He stands over the trembling girl and says it's too bad. He tells her to curse her bad luck as he raises his spear for the killing blow. But before he can strike, a massive winged lion, a chimera, descends upon them. The beast lets loose a terrifying roar that echoes through the forest. The guard screams, scrambling away in pure terror. The chimera ignores him, its eyes fixed on the helpless girl on the ground. The girl is suddenly jolted backwards, pulled away from the monster. She is flung through the air, landing in an unfamiliar part of the woods. There, Amami sits, dazed and confused, having appeared from nowhere. He looks down at his hands, trying to process his impossible situation. He calls out into the silent forest, asking if anyone is there. He feels a strange nudge from behind. His bottle of sports drink is being slurped up by something small. He turns to see a little slime creature with a wooden bucket on its head. His expression is one of pure, unadulterated wonder. He pinches himself, the sharp pain confirming this is not a dream. His scientific curiosity overpowers his fear as he ponders the creature's biology. He wordlessly offers the rest of the drink to the slime, who happily accepts. He realizes this is not Saiwajima Island just as the cat-eared girl falls out of a tree and lands beside him. He is startled by her sudden arrival, his eyes drawn to her strange ears and labored breathing. His medical instincts take over as he notes her breathing is dangerously irregular. She looks at him, trying to speak, but her words are lost in panicked gasps. He feels a surge of frustration, wanting to help but unable to understand her. He is suddenly knocked aside by a powerful, unseen force. The little slime begins to transform, swelling into a large, dark, intimidating shape. Amami stares, speechless at the sudden change. The slime telepathically sends him a single, urgent message: run. He is shocked that he understood, but wonders what he is supposed to be running from. Then he sees it, the chimera has found them. He scoops up the injured girl and flees into the dense woods. He runs harder than he ever has, sweat pouring from his brow. The chimera roars and gives chase, crashing through the trees right behind them. He trips on a root, sending them both sprawling to the forest floor. He rolls away just as the chimera's claws tear through the spot where he lay. The beast unleashes a blast of energy that scorches the earth. It emerges from the smoke, unscathed and furious. Amami knows they cannot escape, and decides he must create a diversion with his medical penlight. He breaks from cover and yells, drawing the monster's attention to himself. The chimera fixes its predatory gaze on him. Yuto charges headfirst toward a monstrous beast as his companion Korone cries out in alarm. The massive ram-horned lion roars and lunges, its claws outstretched to strike Yuto down. But as the beast attacks, a brilliant light erupts from Yuto's hand, forcing him back with a pained cry. The burst of energy explodes outwards, a blinding wave of force from Yuto that engulfs the entire clearing. Rain and shimmering particles fall in the aftermath of the powerful blast. Beaten back by Yuto's unexpected power, the great beast turns and flees into the wilderness. As the dust and smoke finally settle, the immediate danger has passed. Yuto looks down not with pride, but with gratitude for a small slime creature, realizing its amazing power saved them and allowed him to understand Korone's words. He rushes to an injured person's side, relieved that they are saved but immediately noticing the telltale rashes on their skin. Lying on the ground, a woman struggles to breathe, her body in the throes of a severe allergic reaction. He immediately diagnoses an allergic reaction. The girl is covered in hives, wheezing, and rapidly losing consciousness. He checks for her pulse at the wrist but feels nothing, a clear sign of dangerously low blood pressure. His fears are confirmed with a single word: anaphylaxis. An explanatory page defines this as a severe, life-threatening allergic reaction known as anaphylactic shock. He notes the wound on her leg is not the immediate threat. He must treat the anaphylaxis first. Rummaging through his bag, he urgently searches for and finds an adrenaline auto-injector. He quickly prepares the device, commonly known as an EpiPen. The preparation is deliberate and focused. He leans over her and apologizes, warning that this will hurt. With a click, he presses the injector firmly into her thigh. As he works, a group of imposing beastmen approach, calling him Sir Human. They announce they are from the nearby village. An elderly beastman angrily identifies the girl as his granddaughter and demands to know what the human is doing to her. Amami flinches under the weight of their suspicion. He explains that he is in the middle of treating her and desperately needs a clean and safe place to continue. The beastmen are baffled by the concept of treatment. They lead him through the woods to a rustic village made of timber. Inside one of the huts, he lays her on a wooden table to continue his work. He attaches a pulse oximeter to her finger to check her blood oxygen levels. He breathes a sigh of relief as the reading shows 98%, meaning she won't need intubation, and resolves to find an 4 route for steroids. The grandfather watches, his eyes wide with fear, believing her swollen skin and labored breathing are the result of a curse from the forest god. Amami hangs a bag of saline solution, preparing in 4 drip. The village chieftain watches the medical procedure and concludes this human must be a powerful magician. As the girl's breathing stabilizes, Amami announces that for now, she is in the clear. The chieftain can only stare in disbelief. The 4 fluid drips into her arm. Her eyes slowly open. Amami smiles, pleased that her level of consciousness is improving. She sees him and whispers, "Human," her eyes filled with fear. She bolts upright and leaps from the table, and Amami shouts for her to wait as the 4 is still attached. The 4-line pulls taut, sending a jolt through her arm. She crashes to the floor in a heap. She scrambles away from him as he slowly kneels down to her level. He gently tells her that her leg must still be in pain. He asks if she would be willing to let him examine it. She reacts with a burst of bubbly light, flustered and confused. The strange bubbles fill the room around her. Amami looks on, puzzled by this unexpected magical reaction. She quietly relents, agreeing to let him treat her wound. The scene shifts to the slave trader from before, now in a grand church. He is speaking with a regal, priest-like figure. The priest uses a glowing power to heal the trader's wounds. This priest is a horned being, radiating an aura of calm authority. Blood drips from the healed hands. The trader weeps with gratitude for being saved from the chimera. The priest dismisses his thanks, telling him only to follow the light of the one true God. With a heavy heart, the priest notes that the trader's companions might have been saved if they were treated sooner, a testament to the trader's immense faith. But ultimately, the priest declares, their faith was not enough. Bells toll over a misty, dark city as the priest laments their unfortunate fate. Back in the village hut, Amami finishes stitching the girl's leg. She touches her leg, amazed that the pain is completely gone, and he explains that the anesthesia is working. They exchange words of relief, both glad that she is okay. She then asks him the question that has been on her mind. Is he a magician? He chuckles, clarifying that he is just a doctor, and that if he could use magic, he would have freed her from her collar and claws already. She is confused, saying that anesthetic is a treatment used only by human magicians, but he explains that medicine is a practical skill, not magic, and it is not limited to humans. He tells her that if she wishes it, he would be more than willing to teach her. With a bright smile, he suggests that they learn it together. He formally introduces himself as Amami Yuto, and she shyly replies that her name is Korone. He accepts her introduction, saying he will be in her care. Amami turns to the chieftain and cheerfully announces that his granddaughter is now as fit as a fiddle. The chieftain's reply shatters the mood. Now that she is healed, they can resell her to the slave brokers. He explains that Korone was offered as compensation to stop the slavers from preying on their village. He adds that since the church has outlawed medicinal magic outside its teachings, they have no other way to pay. Korone tries to defend Amami, but her grandfather silences her with a harsh reminder that slaves do not speak unless spoken to. Amami's face hardens as he states that there is no way he will abandon someone in need right in front of him. The chieftain counters that magic is far more valuable than a single life. He declares Amami a madman, a dangerous element that must be eliminated for the village's sake. A deafening roar tears through the hut as the chimera, their forest god, crashes into the village. The villagers scream in terror, saying the god has never entered the village before and that they are all doomed. The chieftain turns on Amami, accusing the human of bringing this calamity upon them. Amami stands his ground, facing the growling beast. He notices that the chimera is not attacking, but seems to be waiting. His eyes follow the creature's pained movements. He sees the cause of the god's rage. A large, broken spear is embedded deep in its flank. He turns to the terrified villagers and makes a proposal. He shouts a deal to the chieftain. He can calm the beast and restore order, but in exchange, he and Korone must be allowed to leave the village freely. The chieftain, seeing their lives as compensation for the slavers, agrees to the terms. With the deal struck, Amami's resolve is set. He approaches the enormous creature, assessing the wound and judging that an incision is feasible. The villagers watch in stunned silence, wondering what he plans to do. He asks Korone to assist him, stating his medical obligation to attend to any patient, even a god. He prepares his supplies, declaring that whether his patient is a god or a demon, he will not refuse to help them. He states his purpose with unwavering conviction, because he is a doctor. He begins the procedure by washing the wound with saline. The chimera roars in pain as the solution cleanses the injury. He calls on the slime creature to help hold the massive patient still. He applies a local anesthetic, lidocaine, to numb the area around the spear shaft. Next, he administers a sedative, midazolam, and the beast finally grows calm, slumping to the ground. He takes out a razor to shave the thick fur, needing a clear line for the incision despite the infection risk. He closely inspects the point of entry. The spear shaft is buried deep within the creature's muscle. He explains to Korone that the spearhead is likely barbed, meaning he can't just pull it out. He swabs the shaved area with iodopovidone to disinfect it. He instructs Korone to place a surgical drape over the wound. He then hands her a sterile packet, telling her to use the forceps inside to attach the sharp blade to the handle, making him a scalpel. He reminds her to be extremely careful as she handles the delicate, sharp instrument. She follows his instructions perfectly, clicking the blade securely into place. With a triumphant smile, she hands him the scalpel, proudly exclaiming that she did it. He tells her that the surgery is a one-man job, and tasks her with tending to the injured villagers by washing their wounds and applying pressure. He adds gently that after all she has endured, he will not force her to do this. Her eyes flash with a newfound determination. A moment of silent understanding passes between them. She turns to face her people. She is ready to help. Korone asks her grandfather about the forest god. He explains their tribe is able to live here only because the god protects them. Using its immense power, the forest god drives away all who would bring harm to the village. This power is a curse, the grandfather explains, and all who touch the god are afflicted by it. For this reason, a strict taboo forbids anyone from going near the sacred beast. Yudo understands the true problem is not a curse but a physical injury. The spear has a barb like a fishhook, preventing its removal. He considers the normal method for removing a fishhook, pushing it through the other side to snip the barb, but knows this is impossible for something as large as a spear. The only solution, he concludes, is to perform surgery and cut the spearhead out. He presses the scalpel to the god's flesh, feeling how firm and tense the skin is around the embedded weapon. His eyes narrow in concentration as he locates the hidden barb beneath the surface. He makes the first careful incision. He cuts through the tough hide, relieved to find its firmness is similar to that of a human's. He continues to meticulously slice deeper into the flesh. He works with intense focus, his scalpel moving ever closer to the spear's tip. Blood begins to well up from the incision. He has successfully exposed one of the bloody barbs. With one side free, he prays the embedded weapon has not damaged any major organs. He repositions himself to begin work on the other side. From afar, the villagers watch with grim anticipation, the chieftain declaring that Yudo must die if he fails, but will suffer the god's curse if he succeeds. Korone turns to her grandfather with new resolve. She announces that she will provide medical aid to everyone, including him. Yuto finishes his work, the entire double-barbed spearhead now exposed from the flesh. He knows he must now suture the wound, lamenting the lack of a proper operating table and the little time he has. He cleans the area in preparation for the final extraction. The slime creature beside him wiggles, ready to assist with the removal. Yuto's eyes widen as he confirms the path is clear to finally pull the weapon out. As he begins to pull, the sedated forest god stirs on the ground. Startled, Yuto pleads for it to remain asleep, wondering if the beast was attacked in its slumber. He tightens his grip on the spear shaft, determined to finish the extraction now. He pulls with steady, careful force. The spearhead slides free with a torrent of blood. At the same time, Korone attempts to treat an injured villager, who recoils and accuses her of imitating the magician. She admits she was a slave, it's true. But she declares she will not remain one and, because she understands pain, she must treat their wounds. The villagers hesitate, one admitting that it's an order from the magician and better than no treatment at all. They look to their chieftain, awaiting his decision. He gives a slow, deliberate nod of approval. The spearhead is almost clear of the wound. With a final, wet pull, the entire weapon is removed. A massive hole is left behind, gushing blood. Yuto realizes in horror that the spear nicked an artery. The onlookers cry out in alarm at the sudden, massive spray of blood. He immediately throws his hands onto the wound, applying pressure. He is drenched in the god's blood as he struggles to control the bleeding. He knows he must reach inside the wound to find the source of the bleeding. He plunges his arm into the gaping hole and successfully finds the severed artery, stemming the flow. Korone rushes to his side, frantic with worry. He reassures her he's all right as the villagers lament the curse he has surely brought upon himself by being showered in the god's blood. As he prepares to ligate the artery, dark clouds cover the sky, plunging the area into darkness. He feels the urgency mount as the wound continues to drip blood in the growing dark. Unable to see, he calls out to Korone and asks her to find a lamp. Korone freezes, her grandfather's words echoing in her head, "You must not go near the forest god." Then she recalls Yuto's own words, that medicine is a skill anyone can learn and use. His invitation for them to learn together strengthens her resolve. She apologizes to her grandfather. She turns and runs toward Yuto with a lit torch, declaring that she is going to help. He thanks her for the light but tells her he needs her help with something else. He asks her to fetch the tool she used earlier to assemble the scalpel, the one with the bent tip. She correctly identifies the curved hemostat, and he praises her for her quick thinking. He then tells her to grab the penlight to her right. She recognizes the magic tool from the forest, and he instructs her to use it to illuminate the inside of the wound. With Korone holding the light steady, he reaches into the incision, knowing he cannot release pressure on the artery. He skillfully clamps the artery, and the bleeding finally stops, much to Korone's amazement. Korone notes he is covered in blood, but he brushes off her concern, intent on restarting the surgery. He acknowledges it isn't hygienic, but he cannot delay the operation any further. He states his simple, unwavering principle: doctors do not run from their patients. He begins to suture the internal tear. An explanation of absorbable versus non-absorbable sutures appears. He informs Korone that while the internal bleeding has stopped, he must close the outer wound or it will reopen. His hands move with practiced speed, stitching the great beast skin together. He deftly ties off the sutures. He completes the closure with a vascular ligation method. The hemostat has done its job, and he explains the next step is to insert a Penrose drain before closing the skin completely. He asks Korone to stay with him just a little while longer. He thinks about how he would like to monitor the patient's recovery, but realizes staying in the village is not an option. The first light of dawn breaks over the horizon. An exhausted Yuto smiles, thanking Korone for her invaluable assistance through the night. He proclaims the arduous surgery is finally finished. The forest god rests peacefully, its wound now closed. Yuto collapses onto the ground in sheer exhaustion, announcing the successful removal of one spear is complete. A credit page is displayed. Even after a sleepless night, Yuto tends to the wounds of the villagers, who thank the Mr. Magician for his tireless work. Yuto decides he must wash his blood-soaked clothes. Korone finds him by the river and asks why he isn't resting, but he explains he's just cleaning up. He tells her it would be scary to get infected by some strange virus. The concept of a virus is completely foreign to her. He suddenly grabs her face, telling her to hold still for a moment. He insists on washing her eyes as well, explaining that viruses in the blood can enter through them and she must tough out the pain. He praises her for her bravery, as a caption details the real-world risk of blood-borne pathogen transmission for surgeons. Yuto muses that he would much prefer a real bath, but Korone tells him such luxuries are only for noblemen. The mention of nobles gives him pause, a thoughtful expression on his face. Korone, taking his warning to heart, sees a remaining spot of blood on him and pushes him into the river to wash off the viruses. She cries out his name as he tumbles into the water with a great splash. Later, Yuto sits with the chieftain, confirming his plan to take Korone with him on his journey. He tells the chieftain he understands the danger, that the slavers who took her may return. The chieftain explains that death is a constant companion in their village. Korone's mother died in childbirth, and her father from wounds sustained while hunting. He laments that their village is too poor and insignificant for healing magicians to visit, a fact that keeps their mortality rates high. The village itself is fading, he says, with barely any young people left, and now their protector god has been wounded by their own hand. Perhaps, he muses, it is fate that Korone should leave this dying place and see the world. He confesses with a heavy heart that he has played every card he had to save his village, but it was all for nothing. Yuto thinks of the people he left behind, resolving that there is nobody who should be given up on. He believes with conviction that where there is a will, there is always a way. He tells the weary chieftain that he does not have to bear all the burdens of his village alone. Korone turns to her grandfather and promises him that she will return someday. She then announces to all the villagers that to repay Sir Yuto for saving them and their god, she will assist him with his magic. She vows to gather the tools she needs to heal everyone from sickness and injury, and only then will she come home. The chieftain suggests she seek these tools in a human country, but Yuto feels he wouldn't fit in among the humans of this world. His greater concern is finding a place where Korone can finally be safe. He asks the chieftain if there is any place where different races can live together in peace. The chieftain points them to a place called the Hollow of the World Tree, the country of the elves. The scene reveals a magnificent city built within the boughs and trunk of a colossal tree. The city is a vibrant, bustling metropolis. The story cuts to Kolnelson, the human priest, arriving in the elven city to meet with two magicians. The two elven magicians dispatched to meet him are introduced. One of the elves tells him they will treat his wounds. The other elf notes that healing magic is an art exclusive to humans. The rulers of the elves, Queen Melina and Princess Yuno, are shown. The queen formally accepts the faith of Kolnelson's people. The princess scoffs, thinking to herself that this faith is merely a political tool, a tax paid for their healing services. Kolnelson laments that his people must suffer for the elves' benefit, as there is too much strife in the world. He wishes that they too had the ability to heal. Back in the village, the beastmen thank Yuto for treating their injuries. He instructs them to practice basic hygiene by keeping their wounds and hands clean. The chieftain shows them a path, warning them that it leads to the western territory of demons, but that many species coexist there. Yuto thanks him for the guidance. The chieftain then tells Korone that for her own safety while traveling, she must refer to Yuto as her master. Korone agrees with delight, while Yuto is flustered and embarrassed by the formal title. The entire village gathers to wave them off as Yuto and Korone begin their journey. The villagers cheer and wave, sending them off with hope. The chieftain watches them depart, a complex expression on his face. As they walk, Yuto expresses his disappointment that he couldn't find the forest god for a post-op checkup. He worries that without proper care, the wound could develop dead space and fester. As if summoned by his words, the forest god appears on the path before them. Yuto is overjoyed and immediately runs to his patient, asking if it was waiting for him. He inspects the wound and is astounded to see it's already closing, the fur growing back with incredible speed. The forest god silently falls into step behind them as they walk. Yuto asks the creature if it intends to travel with them. The beast responds by affectionately nuzzling against him. He questions if it's right for the god to abandon its forest, but decides it would be safer from further attacks if it came along. He agrees to let the god and the slime creature join their party. Korone and the slime are overjoyed, and Yuto apologizes for the sudden expansion of their group. He gently pats Korone on the head. He reflects that even in this strange new world, he is glad he won't be alone as they set off together. The scene cuts back to the human priest Kolnelson, who is being warned by the elf Eccles to cease his treatments and that any attempt to steal healing magic would result in his death. Kolnelson argues that healing magic is the source of all human prosperity and respect. He claims that if the secret of healing magic were ever leaked, it would be a matter of national security, and his country would be destroyed. A story of creation begins, explaining that humans were once weak and oppressed by other races until God gifted them with healing magic. After a great plague, humans thrived thanks to their exclusive magic and became the dominant race. They came to see themselves as God's chosen rulers of the land. But God had not intended for the other races to be oppressed by this new power. So, to prevent the weak from being destroyed, God decided to gift them something different. To restore balance to the world, God introduced a new form of knowledge that anyone of any race could use. This new party, a doctor, a beastman, and a god, travels through the forest. This is the story of how general practitioner Amami Yudo brought modern medicine to a fantasy world. A gruff voice calls out to them from the shadows. Two menacing figures block their path. An elf named Saya checks on the fallen human priest, Sir Kolnelson. Kolnelson tells her that neither magic nor herbs are working on the afflicted demons and that they must leave. Saya stares in wide-eyed horror at their patient. She warns Kolnelson that the demons will declare war and that he will be blamed for the failure upon his return to the human kingdom. Terrified of being executed for his inability to heal the patient, Kolnelson insists that they flee immediately. The scene shifts to an elegant elf working at a glowing forge. In a grand throne room carved from the world tree, the elf Queen Melina presides over her court. Princess Yuno runs frantically towards the throne, shouting that something is wrong. She breathlessly reports that the human healers have fled the city. Queen Melina receives the grave news with a troubled expression. Yuno fears that the humans must have figured out their secret plan. The queen resolves to go to the demons herself and explain the situation directly. Two heavily armed demons stand guard before a massive, ornate door. Queen Melina approaches the demon lords and begins to offer her sincere apologies. A demon lord cuts her off, stating that he already knows what happened and that she must come in to explain herself. The queen is led into a chamber where several imposing demons await her. Both Queen Melina and Princess Yuno look on, their faces filled with dread. One of the demon lords snarls, demanding to know how she plans to fix the mess. The story cuts back to Yudo's party in the forest. Yudo carefully snips the sutures from the forest god's back. He tells the great beast that its wound is clear, and all it needs now is for the surrounding fur to grow back. Korone marvels at the god's incredible healing factor, noting that her own wound is still healing by comparison. Yudo mentions that he would normally write up such a unique recovery in a case study, which he explains is a type of publication used to share information and help other doctors treat illnesses. The forest god's leopard-like tail playfully smacks Korone on the head. Yudo laughs, telling a surprised Korone that the god seems to be apologizing for her earlier leg injury by using its tail to remove her slave collar. Korone is ecstatic, holding the removed collar with a look of pure joy. She thanks the forest god with all her heart. Suddenly, the slime on Yudo's head begins to jiggle frantically, sensing danger. Menacing shadows gather in the trees. A pack of vicious, bird-like wolves emerges from the undergrowth. The fleeing elf magician, Saya, is ambushed by the creatures. One of the wolves bites down hard on her head, its teeth sinking into her scalp. The rest of the pack quickly surrounds the injured elf. Saya, cornered and wounded, steels herself, knowing she must somehow drag the healer she was with back to her city. The wolves lunge at her from all sides. The forest god erupts from the trees, scattering the wolves with Yuto and Korone riding on its back. They land beside the fallen elf, and Yudo quickly assesses that she's been bitten. Saya stares in disbelief at the unlikely group, a human, a beastman, and the forest god, that has just saved her. The pain from her wound overwhelms her and she begins to collapse. Yudo dives forward, catching her just before she hits the ground. Korone asks what to do, and Yuto, ever the doctor, immediately declares that he will treat the elf's wounds. The slime creature nudges him, confirming the gravity of her injuries. He starts with the most severe wound on her shoulder, cleaning it with saline solution from his medical kit. He then asks Korone for gauze. He notices some minor bleeding and decides to prepare an anesthetic with an adrenaline additive to help control it. A caption explains that adrenaline is often added to local anesthetics to constrict blood vessels and reduce bleeding. He carefully draws the mixture into a syringe. He explains that he will inject the anesthetic directly into the wound, rather than through the skin, for faster effect. With Korone providing support, he administers the injection into the elf's shoulder. He completes the injection with precision. Korone watches in amazement as the anesthetic works instantly, stopping the bleeding. Yuto then pulls out a surgical skin stapler to close the wound. He applies the stapler, quickly and efficiently sealing the gash. A staple is shown closing the elf's skin. Korone is impressed with the stapler, amazed at how easily it closes wounds, while Yuto notes it's effective for clean, shallow cuts. With her wounds treated, Yuto stands up, worrying about his dwindling supply of medical tools. The wounded elf, Saya, lies peacefully on the forest floor. Her eyes flutter open as she begins to regain consciousness. She sits up with a start, disoriented and in pain. Yuto and Korone rush to her side, advising her not to touch the wound as it has only been treated, not fully healed. She touches her head in disbelief, realizing the human treated her and the bleeding has stopped. Yuto apologizes that the wound might leave a scar but suggests she could probably hide it with her hair. She looks at him, bewildered, and asks if he is also a healing magician. Yuto is caught off guard by the question. Korone proudly interjects, declaring that her master is the greatest healing magician among all humans. Saya thinks to herself that perhaps her people should have relied on the forest god instead of the human church. She turns to Yuto and, despite the impropriety, begs him to come to her country and save her people. The elf breaks down in tears of gratitude as he agrees without hesitation. She wipes her eyes, overwhelmed by his compassion. She explains that he is needed to heal the spitting blood disease that plagues her people. She describes the symptoms of stomach pain, coughing up blood, and black feces, which Korone recognizes as a terrible disease that affected her own village. Yuto quickly deduces the symptoms point to upper gastrointestinal bleeding and hopes he has the materials left to treat it. He tells her he needs to examine a patient first, then they will depart. He turns to the forest god and asks for a ride, and the creature responds with a happy roar. With the elf Saya now in their party, they mount the forest god once more. The great beast takes off at a blinding speed. They soar high above the trees, flying towards the elven kingdom. The party looks on in awe as they approach the massive world tree. Back in the demon stronghold, a subordinate asks the young boss if he truly believes the elves will succeed in bringing the healers back. The demon leader replies confidently that they will, and they had better be quick about it, or else. The subordinate finishes the threat with a sadistic smile, or else they will kill the elf queen, and then the rest of her people. The final frame closes on the captive queen's tear-filled eyes as she thinks of her daughter, Amami, Korone, and the slime creature ride a great beast through a sun-drenched landscape. The small blue slime companion tumbles happily through the air. Waves crash against a desolate shore, the sound echoing ominously. A voice from a small house cautions someone not to overdo it with the fishing tomorrow. Dr. Okusawa dismisses the concern with a confident smile, asserting that a licensed doctor knows rest is the best cure. A bearded man grins, admitting that getting a scolding from Doc Okusawa gives him shivers down his spine. The man's expression darkens as he stares into the distance, predicting the rain will return. Dr. Okusawa is wished well as he stands before a chasm, his thoughts on a missing person named Amami. Suddenly transported to another world, a massive paw steps forward, carrying him toward the elf kingdom's castle where a patient with a blood-spitting disease resides. The grand, imposing castle looms in the distance, a path leading to its entrance. Korone marvels at the amazing scenery, but her master, Amami, remains silent and thoughtful. The other guide, an elf girl, halts their approach, asking for a word before they enter. She apologizes, confessing that she deliberately omitted something important from her plea for their help. Before she can explain, she vanishes into thin air, leaving Amami and Korone utterly bewildered. Korone stares in shock at the empty space on the bridge leading to the castle. Amami, Korone, and the slime peek cautiously from behind cover. A group of imposing, horned individuals emerges from the castle gates. The elven guide's voice echoes a warning to be careful of these very people she failed to mention. The small group stands frozen as the massive figures block their path. Sir Alec, one of the horned men, glares at an elven woman named Yuno among the arrivals. The elven guide who summoned them kneels, pleading with Sir Alec to release her mother now that she has brought the magician. Sir Alec explodes with rage, calling her a liar for bringing a chimera and fabricating a story about the forest god. He coldly dismisses her explanation, refusing to believe a single word. Pointing an accusatory finger, he roars that her people have broken their pact. The two factions stare each other down in a tense, silent standoff. Sir Alec declares that since they won't uphold their duty after his people worked for them, they will all pay with their lives. Yuno steps forward, correcting him by stating that it was his people, not hers, who broke the pact. The guide rises, shouting that her country provided for their livelihood as compensation, and that was all they could do. She passionately defends her actions, driven by her parents' suffering, and tells them they have no right to speak of duty. Sir Alec scoffs, derisively repeating the word livelihood. He accuses them of discrimination, blaming humans for their pain and questioning the worth of a livelihood that can't even heal the sick. He continues his tirade, accusing them of monopolizing healing magic for profit while caring nothing for his people's lives. He roars that all his people have left is suffering and death, and he will never forgive them. Clenching his fist, he swears he will make them feel the same pain his people have endured. He unleashes a blast of fire directly at the elven guide, engulfing her as Amami and Korone watch in horror. The attack culminates in a massive, blinding explosion. The force of the blast throws Sir Alec's own companions backward. Amami is shielded from the impact, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. A new, menacing voice emerges from the smoke, promising to burn them all to their bones. A colossal black dragon materializes from the flames, radiating immense power. Amami stares up at the creature, sweat pouring down his face in utter awe and fear. He can only utter a single stunned word, dragon. The dragon taunts the human, challenging him to try and heal the energy blast it charges in its maw. A devastating beam of pure energy erupts from the dragon's mouth. The chimera and the companions are caught in the wide, destructive path of the attack. The small slime creature is sent flying through the air by the force of the blast. The energy beam impacts its target with cataclysmic force. The dragon stares in disbelief as a massive whale-like creature emerges, having blocked the attack with a wall of water. The entire area is instantly flooded, drenching Amami, his companions, and the chimera. Amami catches the slime as it lands on his head, thanking it for its timely intervention. The mighty chimera battles fiercely against the strange aquatic beasts that have appeared. The chimera is swarmed on all sides by serpentine and dragon-like monsters. Sir Alec grits his teeth in frustration, wondering how mere humans summoned such powerful allies. Amami walks calmly through the chaos, his focus unwavering as he asks for the person suffering from the blood-spitting disease. He states with urgency that he needs to examine the patient as soon as possible. The companions call out to Sir Magician as the great whale creature looks down at him. With a determined smile, Amami declares that he will help them, vowing never to discriminate against a patient. The elven guide is moved to tears by his compassion as the whale creature turns its gaze toward Alec. A new, regal figure arrives, identified as Lintworm, the king of the dragonkin and dragon of insanity. Yuno gasps in shock, recognizing the powerful monarch who has just appeared. The king, a strikingly beautiful woman, confronts Alec's group, demanding to know why they are trying to kill those who came to heal her. She looks directly at her son, Alec, asking if he even knows who he was just fighting. He dismisses her concern, confidently stating that the chimera would have been no trouble for him. The king looks on with a knowing smile, remarking that it seems her arrival was perfectly timed. Her piercing gaze sweeps over the entire scene. Amami and his companions can only stare back, stunned by this new development. The king walks with absolute authority past the battling beasts. She stops directly in front of Amami's small party. With a delicate finger, she gently pokes the small slime creature. She smiles, saying it's been a while as she addresses the creature as Elder, and Amami's eyes fill with tears of recognition. Lintworm gazes at the slime creature, a knowing look in her eyes as the little being quivers. She turns to Amami, taking full responsibility for the incident and asking how she can make it up to him. Ignoring her son Alec's protests, she commands her followers to release the elven queen Melina and offers a formal apology for her children's actions. Suddenly, she is racked by a violent cough, spewing a mouthful of dark blood. The blood splatters across the ground as Amami and a stunned Alec watch in horror. Lintworm collapses, and Amami realizes with dawning dread that she is the patient with the blood-spitting disease. He immediately snaps into action, ordering Yuno to help him move her to a place where she can lie down and telling Korone to carry his medical equipment. Alec roars in fury, demanding the human get his hands off his mother. Amami remains completely focused on his patient, ignoring the furious outburst. Alec's eyes are wide with a mixture of rage and helplessness. Amami's gaze is firm and resolute as he shouts at the others to move quickly. They carry her to an ornate bed that has been set up within a grove of trees. He begins his examination by pulling down her lower eyelid, confirming the palpebral conjunctiva is stark white. A medical note explains that this conjunctival pallor is a key sign of severe anemia. Amami suspects she has anemia, though he is unsure if her body functions like a human's, and warns she may need a blood transfusion. He explains to Korone that a transfusion involves giving the patient blood from another person to replenish her supply. The elven guide is visibly shocked by this suggestion. Yuno recounts that she heard of blood transfusions long ago. She explains that the practice was forbidden after those who received blood suffered and died. A tragedy Amami suspects was caused by mismatched blood types or unhygienic conditions. A detailed text box explains the science of blood types and the fatal side effects of incompatible transfusions, as the elf guide mentions their reliance on herbs. Yuno laments that if the herbs and leaves from the world tree had been effective, none of this conflict would have happened. She elaborates that the leaves of the world tree can calm fevers and ease pain, which is the very reason their country was established around it. Amami, holding one of the leaves, learns it is brewed and drunk, and then asks if the tree's bark would also have medicinal properties. He is told the bark cannot be used, prompting him to speculate that the leaves might contain a compound similar to aspirin or quinine. He pulls a blister pack of pills from his bag, showing it to an astonished Alec. He explains that this is aspirin, a medicine that serves a similar purpose of easing pain and fever. However, he warns that with her symptoms, aspirin would be dangerous, as it thins the blood and damages the stomach lining, which would worsen any internal bleeding. Korone realizes it would have the opposite effect, while a panel details the real-world history of aspirin and quinine from natural tree barks. Amami strongly advises them to stop using the leaves as medicine, as they may carry the same risks as aspirin. Alec demands to know if this is true, and Amami clarifies that while he suspects it, he cannot be 100% certain without further analysis. A desperate Alec asks how they are supposed to help her now. Amami deduces from the symptoms that she has an upper gastrointestinal bleed and says an endoscopy would be the ideal procedure, a concept foreign to Korone. He explains that an endoscope is a tool that allows a doctor to see inside the body, locate an internal bleed, and even stop it. Lintworm looks up at him weakly, addressing him as Mr. Human. She says she understands now why the elder sticks with him, correctly guessing that he is not from this realm. The others look on, confused by her cryptic words, as Amami and Lintworm share a moment of understanding. Lintworm turns her head and calls weakly for her son, Alec. She tells him that this is as far as she can go. With her remaining strength, she apologizes to the elves and her son, saying she has no choice but to give up here. Alec gently takes his mother's hand in his own. Tears stream from Lintworm's closed eyes as she accepts her fate. Her head falls limp to the side as her life fades away. Korone turns to Amami, her voice filled with despair, asking if there is truly nothing they can do. Amami weighs his options, knowing he lacks the tools for a blind laparotomy and that vasopressin alone may not be enough. His gaze falls upon the chimera, and a brilliant idea suddenly strikes him. Korone watches as Alec collapses over his mother's hand in grief. A hopeful smile spreads across Amami's face as he announces there may be a way to save her after all. Lintworm whispers that the naughty kid takes after her as Amami sprints away with purpose. The elves rush to their queen's side, asking if she is all right as she apologizes for the trouble she has caused. An elf girl smiles, her long hair flowing as Amami stands in the background, a new resolve in his eyes. Alec demands to know if Amami truly has a way to save his mother, and Amami confirms it, but states he needs to check the cuts on Alec's hand first. Amami points out that the cuts Alec received in his dragon form mean his mother's dragon form will also have sustained wounds, which gives him an idea. He explains with a confident smile that because of these cuts, he believes it is possible to treat Lintworm's condition. Lintworm listens as Amami clarifies his plan. Even without an endoscope, if she transforms into a massive dragon, he will be able to help her. He declares his intention to physically enter her dragon body and stop the internal bleeding directly. Both Lintworm and Alec stare at him, their eyes wide with disbelief at his insane proposal. Amami addresses the group, announcing that to proceed with the procedure, he will need everyone's help with a few things. Alec immediately refuses, his voice laced with suspicion as he declares he can't trust humans. He clenches his fist, vowing that there is no way he will let a human bastard enter his mother's body. Amami, understanding his distrust, offers a deal: come and watch the procedure, and if Alec feels tricked in any way, he can do what he wants with him. Alec narrows his eyes, considering the human's bold proposition. He looks at Amami with contempt, asking if he's sane and if he feels any fear at all. Amami meets his gaze and admits that he does feel fear, the terror of not treating a dying patient right in front of him. Lintworm lies still, her eyes closed as she processes his words. The group ascends a long, winding stone staircase up the side of a cliff. They arrive at a vast, circular observation deck high above the trees. Lintworm and Alec stand together on the wide platform, awaiting the next step. Amami questions if a space of this size is truly necessary, and the elves confirm that it is. One of the elves presents him with a massive, thick coil of rope, which he accepts with gratitude. Alec watches with a stern, unreadable expression as the preparations continue. He asks Amami if he's forgotten something he requested for the operation. Amami reminds him that he asked for a large blade to assist in the procedure. Alec tells him to take a good look. With a swift, decisive motion, he severs one of his own horns at the base. Blood sprays from the wound as he completes the cut with a grimace. He spits on the stone floor as the severed horn falls. The horn lands and instantly transforms into a massive, ornate black sword, surprising Amami. Alec holds out the blade, explaining it is forged from his own blood and magic power, and tells Amami to use it. He stands with his hand over the bleeding stump of his horn, his gaze intense and challenging. Amami accepts the weapon with a simple, determined, sure. Lintworm stands alone in the center of the platform and declares, I will. Alec's attendants rush to his side, concerned about his hand, but he dismisses them and tells Amami to proceed. The group discusses the nature of magic power, explaining it as converted mana from the air, a concept that differs between races. Amami holds the impossibly large sword, admitting he doesn't understand this power but knows it's time to act. The blade of the sword hums with a strange, otherworldly energy. As Amami experiments with his penlight, it unexpectedly causes the sword to erupt in a torrent of flames. The others explain that the flames are sealed within the sword because Lintworm is a fire dragon, a fact Amami finds incredibly cool. He grips the hilt, and the flames recede back into the blade. He remarks that a sword like this is actually much better for his plan and declares that he is ready. Lintworm and Alec stand apart on the vast stone platform, prepared for the transformation. Alec ties a piece of cloth around the stump of his severed horn. Lintworm begins to glow, her body radiating a brilliant, sparkling light. She is completely enveloped in an aura of pure energy. The energy explodes outward in a blinding flash and a powerful shockwave. The world is consumed by the sheer force of the transformation. As the light subsides, a colossal, silver-scaled dragon stands in her place. The magnificent dragon's head alone dwarfs the onlookers, its eyes gleaming with ancient power. It spreads its massive wings and takes to the sky, circling the platform in a show of immense power. The dragon's majestic form soars through the air, its long tail trailing behind it. The group on the ground can only stare up in stunned silence, completely awestruck. Amami marvels at the amazing creature, admitting it's even bigger than he imagined. He looks up at the flying dragon, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and awe. Alec watches Amami's reaction with a cold, suspicious glare. Amami checks on Corona, who is struggling with the weight of the massive rope but insists she can handle it. He addresses the dragon directly, asking Mrs. Lintworm to please lay down on her left side. The dragon complies, but as she opens her massive jaws, she coughs up a pool of black, viscous liquid. The liquid splatters across the stone with a sizzling sound as the onlookers cry out in alarm. Amami stares in shock as the liquid boils on the ground, realizing its potent stomach acid is melting the stone floor. He grimaces, knowing his initial plan to enter through her mouth is now impossible, as triggering her gag reflex would get him bathed in the deadly acid. A medical diagram explains the gag reflex, a physiological response that complicates any procedure involving the throat. Alex scoffs at Amami's confidence, pointing out that dragon's blood is scorching hot and asking if he already needs help. Amami apologizes for his ignorance but firmly states it's too early to give up, asking for any other crucial information about dragons he might need. Reluctantly, Alec agrees for his mother's sake, holding up 2 fingers and saying there are 2 things he can tell him. He warns Amami of 2 certain deaths: first, touching the shining stones in a dragon's throat, and second, being soaked in their stomach juices which can instantly digest anything. Amami calmly absorbs the dire warnings and thanks him for the information. He looks up to see Korone has already scaled the dragon's colossal back and is asking where she should tie the rope. He shouts for her to secure the rope somewhere near the dragon's nose. Korone looks back in disbelief, asking if they're really going through the nose, and Amami simply confirms her suspicion. A medical note explains the real-world procedure of transnasal endoscopy, a method used to avoid triggering the gag reflex. Amami and the slime creature rappel down the dragon's massive snout as the medical bag is lowered behind them. A cloud of hot steam erupts from the dragon's cavernous nostril as they approach the entrance. Standing inside the sweltering heat of the nasal passage, Amami steadies his resolve and says he's ready. He announces that he will now begin the operation to stop the internal bleeding in the upper gastrointestinal tract. He plunges headfirst into the dark, narrow passage of the dragon's body. The oppressive, humid heat immediately overwhelms him, far hotter than he anticipated. He recoils as something brushes against him in the darkness. He is shocked to see the small slime creature has followed him into the perilous passage. He tells it to leave, warning of the danger, but the slime simply lands on his head, refusing to go, and he resigns himself to its company. He pushes forward and sees a brilliant light shining from deeper within the throat. The light becomes blindingly intense as he draws closer. He arrives in a cavernous space, the source of the light a cluster of massive, dazzling stones embedded in the pharyngeal wall. Heeding Alec's warning, he moves with extreme caution, careful not to touch the lethal stones or the surrounding tissue. With unwavering focus, he knows he must slip quickly through the passage and into the esophageal inlet. He carefully navigates the treacherous path, the deadly stones just inches from his body. He pushes onward, his body brushing against the soft, slick walls of the esophagus. Suddenly, a powerful, crushing force slams into him from all sides. The slime creature generates a protective field, but the pressure is still immense, sending them tumbling. He is thrown violently against the contracting esophageal wall. The passage continues to churn, tossing him about uncontrollably. He struggles to breathe, the immense pressure threatening to crush him. He realizes with dawning horror that this is peristalsis, the muscular contractions that push food toward the stomach. He uses his penlight to illuminate the passage beyond the shining stones, finding only pitch blackness. His beam reveals large, dark ulcer scars lining the esophageal wall, which he likens to takoyaki burns. A medical note explains that takoyaki burns are severe esophageal ulcers caused by swallowing food that is deceptively hot on the inside. He continues his descent, his light scanning the deeply scarred walls of the passage. He identifies the condition as grade B reflux esophagitis and notes the severe inflammation where the esophagus meets the stomach. He questions if simple esophagitis could be the cause of such severe bleeding, as a text box details the medical classification of the condition. A low rumbling sound echoes from far above him, coming from the direction of the mouth. He looks up to see the upper esophageal sphincter closing, sealing the passage behind him. He is caught in a powerful peristaltic wave that flings him downward toward the stomach. Alec's final, dire warning echoes in his mind. Their stomachs can instantly digest anything. He plummets into the vast, dark chamber of the stomach, knowing the deadly digestive juices await him below. Outside, one of Alec's attendants watches Korone in awe, marveling at her incredible strength as she single-handedly manages the massive rope. The lifeline rope snaps taut inside the dragon's stomach. Korone feels the sudden jolt and realizes something is wrong. Alec grabs the rope, his face etched with concern as he calls out to the human inside. Amami is violently submerged in the scorching dragon's blood, the heat searing him. The slime creature is knocked unconscious by the sudden impact. He frantically reaches for his small companion as it drifts away. The slime extends a tendril just in time for Amami to grab hold. He pulls the slime to safety, narrowly avoiding a worse fate. Safe for the moment, Amami breathes a sigh of relief as he clings to his friend. Meanwhile, Lintworm and Queen Melina have a quiet, meaningful exchange. Amami lands with a splash in the dragon's stomach, the walls pulsing around him. He knows he needs a foothold, that going deeper into the acidic pool would be fatal. He plunges the magical sword into the fleshy stomach wall. His eyes widen in alarm as he sees the stomach juices churning below. He uses the sword as an anchor, pulling himself out of the deadly liquid. He gasps for breath, his arms sizzling from a minor splash of the potent acid. He scrambles to safety on the stomach lining, realizing his clothes saved him from a gruesome death. He clutches the slime, relieved that they both survived the fall. He thanks the small creature, knowing he is only alive because of its help. He apologizes for the trouble, calling his companion a beauty for its heroic save. He holds the slime close, expressing his immense gratitude. He admits he doesn't know the creature's name, but he recalls that Mrs. Lintworm called it Elder. He realizes the slime doesn't have a name and decides to call it L for short. The slime, now named L, celebrates its new name with a happy dance, multiplying itself in joy. Amami smiles, sharing a happy moment with his new friend. His expression becomes serious again as he prepares to continue his mission. With a final look at his companion, he declares it's time to move on. Outside, Alec feels the rope move and prepares to pull. He grumbles about his anxiety at having to hold the rope for a human. A medical note explains the use of air or carbon dioxide to inflate the stomach during a real endoscopy for better visibility. Amami lands in the cavernous stomach, a diagram showing his position relative to the major anatomical features. He follows a trail of blood, knowing the source of the bleeding must be just ahead. He finds a pool of what he thinks is blood but realizes it's not stomach acid, so he avoids it to prevent slipping. He raises his penlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. He trips, the slime cushioning his fall as his light reveals a horrifying sight. He stands before a massive, dark pool of freshly bled blood. He confirms they are close to the source of the bleeding. He shines his light on a massive, irregular growth protruding from the stomach wall. A diagram explains the Yamada classification for macroscopic gastric lesions, and Amami identifies the growth as a type 4 polyp. His eyes widen in horror as he makes the grim diagnosis. It's a malignant neoplasm, it's cancer. Outside, Alec feels a sudden lurch as the dragon's body convulses in pain. In a dense, dark forest, a dragon's head lies severed on the ground. Two figures curse their misfortune as they navigate the hostile terrain. A man named Sir Colnelson complains about the shithole they're in and the lack of roads. He grumbles about having to hide when it's the bastards' fault they are in this mess. His female companion wonders why their purification and regeneration magic, and even the leaves of the world tree, are having no effect. Her companion callously states that he doesn't care about the spitting blood disease. He declares it an incurable dud disease and that the monster who has it is just unfortunate. She looks on with a grim expression, knowing that's all there is to it. He channels a powerful lightning magic into his hand. She questions his dismissal, reminding him that the great Eccles heals most people with the disease. He furiously retorts that Eccles is an anomaly and should not be used as a standard. He insists that normally, no one can heal such a hopeless disease. His companion listens, a new thought sparking in her mind as she clutches her staff. She watches a pack of black wolves emerge from the dense foliage. She urgently warns Sir Colnelson about the pack of black wolves that has appeared before them. Inside the dragon's stomach, Amami observes the massive, dark tumor. He notes its large size and wonders if he should treat it the same way he would a human's. He concludes that the anemia is a direct result of the blood loss from this massive tumor and knows that, with the stalk visible, he must remove it. A detailed medical text box provides a general overview of tumors and the different classifications of cancer. Amami explains that normally he would use a polypectomy snare to tie off the tumor's stalk and an electrocauter to seal the wound, but he has neither, and they wouldn't be large enough anyway. He realizes he can use the massive rope to ligate the stalk, noting its robustness should be enough to withstand the heat of the internal stones, but he worries he lacks the physical strength to do it alone. He laments that the magical sword is not an electrocauter, as he cannot switch between cutting and cauterizing, making the tumor's removal far more dangerous than a simple ulcer. A diagram and explanation of an electrocauter machine detail its dual functions of incising tissue and performing hemostasis to prevent bleeding. Amami knows that if the anemic lintworm's stomach fills with blood from the procedure, she will most certainly not survive. For that one critical reason, he knows he cannot fail. He steels his resolve, understanding that her condition will only worsen, and he cannot afford to go back for other tools, even if they existed. He must act now, as a text box details the fatal progression of stomach cancer, from hemorrhaging to metastasis. His eyes are wide with focus and determination. He grips the rope, L perched on his shoulder, ready to begin. He expertly loops the rope around the massive stalk of the tumor. He pulls on the rope, testing the tension. He plans to use a square knot, knowing he must apply as much force as possible without breaking the rope. A medical diagram illustrates the proper technique for a surgical square knot compared to other, less secure knots. He begins to tie the knot, his face a mask of intense concentration. With a grunt of effort, he pulls the rope with all his might. He strains, every muscle screaming as he tries to tighten the ligation. Blood begins to seep from the base of the tumor. The rope is not yet tight enough to cut off the flow. He pulls harder, his body shaking with the immense effort as the tumor's color begins to shift from red to purple. Suddenly, Al springs into action, its tree-like appendage sprouting from its head. The appendage wraps around the rope, adding its strength to Amami's. Amami is amazed to see that the slime creature can control the small tree on its head. With El's help, he gives one final, mighty tug, thanking his companion for its crucial assistance. He shines his light on the now fully ligated tumor, its blood supply cut off. The bleeding has been stopped, and the knot is secure, allowing him to proceed to the next, most dangerous step. He ignites the magical sword, its blade flickering with intense flames. He uses the flaming blade to carefully sever the stalk of the massive tumor. He knows the sword is not a true electrocauter, but it will have to do. He slowly and carefully slices through the tumor's base, the soft tissue yielding to the magical flames. The massive tumor is finally severed, falling away into the depths of the stomach. Outside, Alec grows increasingly anxious, wondering why the human is taking so long. Korone reassures him, telling him to calm down and have faith that her master will save his mother. He scoffs at her confidence and warns her that if the human fails, she won't be getting off scot-free. She proudly declares she has a basis for her faith. Her master is the amazing person who saved her life. Yuno adds that he also saved her, a person to whom he had no relation. She tells a stunned Alec that she truly hopes his mother, whom she has known for ages, is able to pull through. She counsels him that for now, all they can do is wait and believe, as his mother is also fighting her own battle. Alec looks down, his frustration giving way to a flicker of hope as Yuno places a reassuring hand on his. The massive dragon lets out a low groan of pain. The beast's body lies still on the platform, a pool of black blood spreading from its mouth. A flashback shows Amami's brief conversation with Alec before entering the dragon, where he decided his normal clothes would allow for easier movement despite his lab coat's resistance to stomach acid. The dragon's mouth hangs open, a dark, ominous cavern from which the rope still hangs. The flaming sword slices through the air with incredible speed. Amami stares in shock, realizing the blade cut through completely. The massive, rope-bound tumor is now severed from the stomach wall. He watches with grim focus as the ligation holds firm. With the grim task finished, he turns away from the scene. His eyes widen in horror as he identifies the dire consequence of his action. A torrent of blood erupts from the now exposed artery. The massive tumor plunges into the stomach acid waiting below. The dark liquid churns violently as the mass begins to dissolve. Amami grits his teeth, bracing for the next phase of the operation. Outside, Queen Melina stands in a grand library, deep in thought. Lintworm's colossal dragon form suddenly groans in agony. Her followers cry out in alarm as the beast writhes on the ground. They scatter as the dragon thrashes wildly in a wave of dark energy. Korone watches in terror as the lifeline rope goes slack and then snaps. The dragon's mouth falls open, a river of dark fluid pouring out. Alex stares into his mother's lifeless eye, screaming her name. Inside, Amami is tossed about in the chaotic flood. Korone panics that her master cannot return while Alec realizes the fluid is mostly blood, not acid. Alec feels his mother's body growing colder and knows she will die at this rate. He declares he cannot sit still any longer while Korone looks on in disbelief. He transforms into his own smaller, black dragon form and flies towards his mother. He bites into her neck, beginning a desperate and risky procedure. The onlookers are stunned by his reckless action. His attendants plead for the young boss to stop, warning that his mother wouldn't want this. Queen Melina explains he is trying to transfer his own mana into her, as weakened dragons cannot absorb it themselves. She reveals that just like losing too much blood, losing too much mana will lead to death. Korone looks on, her face etched with worry for them both. The black dragon channels its energy into the larger silver one. The attendants again beg him to stop, knowing he will collapse if he continues. Alec falters, realizing that by himself, he can do nothing. He feels utterly useless as his own mother is dying right in front of him. But with a surge of desperate resolve, he knows he has to do something. The group of onlookers can only watch the unfolding tragedy. Korone closes her eyes and prays to Amami, placing her final hope in him. Deep within the stomach, a figure emerges from the bloody torrent. The blood splashes away as Amami stands, glowing with a protective aura. He looks down at his hands, shocked that he is unharmed. He thanks his small slime companion for protecting him again from the stomach acid. He sees the slime is weak and knows the protection will not last, so he must hurry now that the rope is gone. He pushes forward with renewed purpose, stating he must first confirm the tumor stem. He realizes the massive amount of blood is diluting the stomach acid, which is the only reason he can survive the torrent. His face is a mask of grim determination. He reaches the source of the bleeding, the massive ligated stump of the tumor. He knows that if the blood flow slows, her blood pressure could drop and she could enter a state of shock. A medical text explains that hemorrhagic shock occurs when more than 20% of total blood volume is lost. Amami sees his chance to act now that the momentum of the bleeding is slowing down. He must cauterize the exposed blood vessels, but he can't find the blade. He spots the sword nearby and summons it, ready to resume the surgery. L uses its power, enveloping Amami in a radiant energy. He focuses his power into the sword, preparing for the final step. He leaps toward the wound, aiming to hit the bleeding area without piercing the stomach wall. He concentrates on the exposed, gushing artery. With a final shout, he plunges the sword into the wound. But the blood pressure is still dropping, even with L using all its power. The force of the hemorrhage is immense. Amami screams with effort, knowing he will be pushed back if he messes up. Lintworm's eye remains closed, her body still. Her massive form convulses, throwing Alec from her neck. The companions watch in horror as Korone cries out that she is in pain. Alec is thrown back from the force of his mother's convulsions. He looks on in horror as her massive form writhes in agony. From within, Lintworm tells her son that this is as far as she can go. Alec's face is a mask of shock and despair. He screams for the human as his mother seems to pass. The last of his energy dissipates around her still form. His attendants cry out that the young boss has run out of mana and that this is the end. Korone closes her eyes, clenching her fist in shared grief and frustration. But deep inside the dragon's stomach, a brilliant light flashes. Amami stands before the massive, cauterized wound, his sword still embedded in the flesh. A medical text explains the different methods of endoscopic hemostasis he just performed. He confirms the bleeding has stopped and thanks the small, exhausted slime creature for its help. After recovering his penlight, he looks around at the aftermath of the procedure. He realizes the smoke and blood will make navigating difficult as he plans his exit. He is struck with the grim realization that he lost his rope and has no easy way out. Suddenly, the world around him begins to distort and crack. He is thrown into a disorienting void, unsure if the passage is collapsing. He finds himself sitting on a park bench, a colleague asking if he slept much. The colleague calls out his name, Amami. He then asks Amami why he works himself to the bone for his patients. Back in the other world, Lintworm's massive body begins to rumble. With a great heave, her jaws open and she expels a dark torrent. The onlookers cry out in shock as a massive, blackened sphere lands before them. The force of the impact sends out a thick cloud of steam and debris. Alec is thrown to the ground by the blast. He struggles to rise, weakly calling out for his mother as his attendants rush to his side. The great dragon slowly begins to stir. Her followers help a stunned Alec to his feet. His eyes are wide with disbelief and dawning hope. The assembled dragonkin can only stare in silence. The elves, too, are frozen in astonishment. Korone's face is a picture of pure shock. Queen Melina watches the scene unfold, noting that Amami still has not emerged. She turns to a worried Korone, speaking her name to comfort her. From within the dragon's mouth, two hands push against the great teeth. Amami emerges, exhausted but triumphant, and announces his return. Korone cries his name in relief, rushing forward to embrace him. But Alec immediately confronts him, demanding to know what is wrong with his mother. Amami explains that the mass she coughed up was the cause of her illness. He smiles, reassuring everyone that she is all right now. Lintworm looks down at her son, softly speaking his name. Alec is overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his face. Amami declares the upper gastrointestinal hemostasis and gastric tumor resection surgery a success. Amami, Korone, and the now-tamed chimera walk together through a sun-drenched forest. A great celebration is underway in the Elven Kingdom, with people of many races gathered in the streets. On a grand balcony, the Elven Queen addresses Yuno, suggesting they call for Sir Amami to join them. Elsewhere, a small dragon playfully breathes fire at a startled Amami. Korone and Elle watch as the small dragon continues its fiery display. The small dragon, revealing itself to be Alec, proudly announces, "Here we go." He unleashes a powerful blast of fire upon the gathered group. The fire explodes in a brilliant, non-harmful display of magical power. Alec asks Amami if his fire blast has killed all the bacteria things he hates. Amami confirms that the fire has indeed sterilized his scalpel blade, but now the scalpel itself is dead too. He muses that sterilizing with fire was a good idea, but perhaps it was a bit too much. A medical text box provides a detailed definition of sterilization and its difference from antimicrobial action. Korone admits that she still doesn't understand what bacteria, viruses, and germs are, a sentiment echoed by the snake-like creature on her shoulder. Amami acknowledges that in this different world he can't be certain, but he vows to one day find a way to prove their existence. He turns to the small dragon with a smile and thanks Alec-kun for sticking with him. Alec scoffs, turning away with a flustered expression. Amami notices the bandage on Alec's hand, a reminder of the horn he sacrificed. He tells Alec to let him know if the hand starts hurting again so he can take a look at it. The elven guide, Yonu, runs up to Amami, thanking him for saving her mother and startling him in the process. She presents him with a fresh set of clothes, which she has mended to the best of her ability. Amami is touched by her kindness, but she insists she did it of her own volition. She announces that the celebration for Lintworm's recovery and the reconciliation of elves and dragons has begun, and he must come and see it. Korone and Alec playfully scold Amami for working too much, insisting he take a break from his germs and join the party. A breathtaking view of the Elven City shows a massive festival in full swing, with magical birds flying overhead. Amami is completely overwhelmed by the joyous, bustling scene before him. He marvels at the sight of so many different races celebrating together in harmony. The festival is a vibrant tableau of feasting, drinking, and merriment among elves, beastmen, and other fantastical creatures. Amami is filled with a sense of wonder, remarking that it's just like a festival back home. The Elven Queen smiles, expressing her profound gladness at seeing everyone gathered together again in this cherished place. Amami quietly agrees, saying that he feels the same way. Lintworm arrives at the celebration, looking regal and fully recovered as she is greeted by her people. She thanks Amami, telling him that her recovery is especially thanks to him. He asks if he can quickly check her eyes to assess her condition. He confirms that her conjunctival ring has regained its reddish color, a great sign that her anemia is improving. Alec impatiently asks how long it will take for his mother to make a full recovery. Amami hesitates, admitting it's hard to say for sure. Alec presses him, angered by the uncertainty, and Amami states that to be honest, he doesn't know. He explains that there are two reasons why he cannot give a definitive answer. First, a dragon's recovery time is likely much different from a human's, pointing to the chimera's unnaturally fast healing as an example. The others agree, recalling how quickly the forest god healed from its wounds. He reveals the second reason is the tumor itself, which now sits inert on the platform. He explains that it was cancer, which can either be benign or malignant and destroy the body, but he lacks the tools to know for sure. He apologizes to Lintworm for not being able to give her a more concrete answer. She and the others look on, a mixture of hope and uncertainty on their faces. Lintworm dismisses his apology, telling him he's done nothing wrong and that she understands he just has to push through. She says she's feeling better now and that sitting around and waiting won't do her any good, asking if there's anything she should be doing. Amami brightens and asks if she would like to have regular checkups with him. Korone looks on, confused by the term regular checkups. He explains that it's a way for a doctor to periodically examine a patient post-treatment to monitor their recovery and treat any new problems that arise. Lintworm questions if he is really willing to go through the hell of entering her dragon body again. He sheepishly admits that for now, he has no other way, and apologizes for putting her through that pain again. She stares at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief at his selflessness. She suddenly bursts into a hearty laugh, her voice echoing through the celebration. She praises his eccentric but considerate spirit and his big heart for apologizing again. With a warm, genuine smile, she tells him that she's really starting to like him. She says that if he's going to be doing checkups on her, it seems she'll be sticking with him for a while, and tells him to call her Lin. A boisterous, one-eyed dwarf laughs, remarking that a dragon taking interest in a human is a rare sight indeed. The elven guide, Yonu, respectfully addresses the dwarf as Normim-sama, who responds in kind, calling her princess. Normim accuses Lintworm of some cunning ploy, chumming up with their mortal enemy. She retorts that their conflict is an old story and warns him that Amami is her savior, and if anything happens to him, she won't forgive them. Normim warns Amami that one mistake could bring the world tree down in flames. Ignoring Lintworm's protests, Normim forcibly gives Amami a celebratory drink, pouring it directly into his mouth. Korone rushes to Amami's side as he collapses, while Normim casually dismisses her concern, saying he just gave him some booze. Amami finds himself seated before a dwarven brewer who offers him the strongest booze in the country, an offer he feels he can't refuse in the festive atmosphere. He takes a sip, noting its odd, rustic flavor and that it doesn't taste too strong for his first drink in a while. A young dwarf named Nino finds Chief Normim and scolds him for wandering off. The gathered crowd, including Lintworm, the Chimera, and a tiny Alec, looks on as Normim is reprimanded by the young princess. A small, horned boy stares in awe at the scene before him. In a dark, dense forest, the injured Sir Kulnilson curses his fate. He complains about the wolves, dragons, and elves, calling his situation the absolute pits. His companion, Oi, tells him to check if they are still being followed, but she is weak and injured. She collapses, begging him to use his regeneration magic on her. He notes her wounds but hesitates, using a magical chant to heal a minor cut on his own finger instead. She tries to stop him, but he coldly states he has to wait. He says he can heal her, but only if he collapses first, as he can only use purification magic. He rationalizes that his magic is more important and that he must preserve it in case something worse happens. He callously dismisses her wounds, noting that she's not even bleeding, and tells her to stop overreacting. She collapses to the ground, her body racked with pain. The sound of rustling bushes signals the return of their pursuers. The black wolves have found them again, and they are dragged away into the darkness. One of the wolves bites down hard on Sir Kulnilson's arm. He screams in agony as the wolf's teeth sink into his flesh. He is overwhelmed by the pack, his cries echoing through the forest. His companion, Oi, reaches a desperate hand toward him as he is dragged away. A group of elven girls calls out to Yunosama, their faces filled with concern. Yonu excuses herself from the celebration, explaining she has some business to attend to. One of the Tengu in the crowd tells the others to watch her performance carefully. The girls begin a rhythmic, coordinated dance, their feet tapping in unison. Rings of light emanate from their feet as they dance upon the stone platform. Amami watches in awe as the ground begins to shine beneath their feet. The entire platform is soon covered in glowing, magical mushrooms. He realizes these are the glowing mushrooms that cover the world tree, which react to the elves' magic. Normim explains that the light of these mushrooms guided his people here when they were lost, and that the elves are essential to the world tree's health. Amami is shown a strange, studded triangular object, the meaning of which is unclear. Normim concludes that giving living space to all and easing their pain with its leaves are the two reasons the world tree is their greatest treasure. But he bitterly adds that they cannot trust humans and would rather rely on the world tree than on magicians, as power is useless if it cannot help them. He admits, however, that with healing magic, they could have had a different future. He tells Amami he doesn't know what he'll do now but that he looks forward to what he will bring to this place. Amami reflects on the completely different value and significance of medicine in this world. Korone calls out to her master, breaking him from his thoughts. He looks at his companions and smiles, a newfound clarity in his eyes as he realizes what he should be doing in this world. Suddenly, a panicked cry rings out. A pack of black wolves is attacking the celebration. The elves are terrified, asking for an explanation from the battered and bleeding Sir Kulnilson and Oi who have just stumbled into the festival grounds. A pack of monstrous black wolves leaps through the forest. The wolves scale the walls of the elven city as elven soldiers try to fight them off, planning to fall back to the hollow. One of the elf captains laments that this is happening again because of those guys. The human priest, Kulnilson, bangs on the city gates, demanding entry and declaring his status as a holy priest. A flashback shows Korone and Yuto sheltering from the rain, feeding small birds. At the castle, the demons and elves look on as Yuto addresses them. Yuto makes a plea, saying there's no time and that he doesn't want anyone to get hurt or lose their life. The elf queen looks up, seemingly having made a decision. Queen Melina gives Princess Yuno a sword, telling her to take care. Yuno takes the sword and announces she's off to join the fight. Alec warns Yuto that the humans who fled are arrogant and believe themselves superior. He continues that if left to their own devices, those humans will cause harm and even death. He asks if Yuto will still save anyone, even people like that. Yuto acknowledges the conflict between his principles and Alec's words. But he reaffirms that he can't just leave someone who is hurt in front of him. He declares with a smile that he won't discriminate, no matter who needs help. Alec is startled by a sudden noise from the large castle doors. He finds his mother, Lintworm, on the other side, and demands to know where the magician fucks are. She informs him that they threw in the towel and escaped through a window. Alec grits his teeth in frustration and anger. Yuto and Korone watch as Alec processes the news. Lintworm tells Yuto to do what he thinks he should. Yuto's eyes are filled with resolve. Lintworm tells her son, Alec, to take time to think and stick to what he believes is right. Alec looks on with a conflicted expression. The forest god roars, ready for battle. Lintworm asks Yuto with a smile if he is going to save them. He replies with a determined yes. Lintworm and Alec watch him go. The forest god takes a powerful step forward. Its snake-like tail whips through the air, clearing a path. It looks back at the city as it prepares to depart. Lintworm orders her demon followers to accompany and protect Princess Yuno. Alec unleashes his power. He transforms into his dragon form. The elven soldiers are being overwhelmed by the black wolves. An elf is viciously mauled by one of the creatures. The elves lament that there are too many of them. The captain orders his troops to hold their ground until reinforcements arrive. An elf is struck down by a wolf. Princess Yuno arrives with her own contingent of elven soldiers, bolstering the line. She reaches out, praising her troops for their excellent work. The soldiers are overjoyed to see the princess and their reinforcements. Yuno and her guard charge into battle. A volley of arrows flies toward the wolves. The arrows find their marks. The forest god's snake tail strikes down a wolf. The elven soldiers recognize the forest god and Sir Alec. One soldier cries with relief that they are saved. The dragon and the chimera roar, intimidating the wolf pack. The terrified black wolves turn and flee. The elf captain, Heath, checks on his injured soldier, Hike. The dragon, Alec, looks on. Yuto runs over to the injured elf, saying he'll take a look. He examines the deep, bloody scratches on the soldier's arm. He explains that wild animals' claws can cause infection and the wound must be treated. He suggests it would be better to move the injured to the castle for proper treatment. He sheepishly admits he doesn't know any other good places. The captain understands and agrees to wait at the castle, ordering Heath to go with Yuto. Yuto asks if anyone else is injured, and Yuno is glad that casualties were kept to a minimum. She tells him that the battle is not over yet. A new, immense threat appears. The human priest, Konelson, laughs maniacally as the black wolves now run from him. A massive eye opens in the darkness. The dragon, Lintworm, holds Konelson in its jaws. She tells Amami that these humans will only hurt others for their own benefit. Konelson screams and curses at the shitty dragon. He continues to rant, and Lintworm suggests it would be best to kill him now to prevent future harm. Yuto shouts for her to wait. Lintworm's eye focuses on him. She closes her jaw slightly. Konelson, recognizing Yuto as a human, begs for help. Lintworm's snake-like tail whips towards Yuto's party. The dragon asks where the other human is. The elves and Yuto's party say they only saw Konelson. Lintworm comments on how very human it is to leave one's companion behind in a pack of wolves. She orders Konelson to find the other human or she'll kill him. She reiterates that he's dead if he fails. Konelson agrees, secretly planning to find an opening to run. He points in a random direction to buy himself time. The dragon flies off in the direction he pointed. Yuto realizes they must hurry, or Alec will kill both of the human priests. The elf captain, Heath, declares he will accompany them on orders from the princess. The forest god leaps into the air. They travel through a misty forest. The dragon Lintworm arrives at the location, noting the forest god came too. They discover the roasted corpse of a wolf cub, realizing this is the cause of the parent wolf's attack. Saya is horrified, while Connelson suggests they attack the wolves before they are attacked themselves. A pack of massive wolves surrounds them. One of the wolves roars. Saya is pinned down by a wolf. She struggles for breath under the beast's weight. Lintworm watches calmly. She identifies Saya in the chaos. She grabs Saya with her tail. She pulls Saya free from the wolves. Lintworm's eye is cold and calculating. She remarks that Saya is already at death's door. Yuto rushes to Saya's side. Lintworm snorts, unimpressed. Yuto begins his examination, finding no pulse at the radial artery and noting jugular vein distension. He realizes with shock what her condition is. He unbuttons her cape, revealing the problem. Korone is stunned. A deep wound is visible on her chest. He prepares his stethoscope. He presses the stethoscope to her chest to listen. The world holds its breath. He listens for a sign of life. The silence is deafening. His diagnosis hangs in the balance. Every second stretches into an eternity. The fate of the elf lies in what he hears next. Yuto declares the injured elf requires immediate treatment under the rules of triage. The elf captain is confused by the term triage, as Yuto stresses that every moment is crucial. A caption explains triage as a process to determine the priority of treatment in a mass casualty event. The black tag in triage signifies those who are deceased or have unfeasible injuries. The red tag signifies the highest priority for immediate, life-saving treatment. The yellow tag is for delayed treatment, for those whose lives are not in immediate danger. The green tag is for minimal injuries not requiring specialized care. The dragon lintworm complains about a splinter in its hand. The human priest, Connelson, demands that he be saved first, telling the dragon to shut its mouth. The elf captain questions Yuto's decision to treat the humans before his injured soldier, Hike. The demons, elves, and Korone debate prioritizing the holy priest due to his rank, but Alex says he's killing them anyway. Yuto ignores the debate and tells the injured elf, Hike, to let him take a look. He holds out his hand to the priest. The priest, Connelson, presents his burned hand. Yuto quickly assesses the injury and triages him as green, for minimal injuries. He apologizes, stating that he is prioritizing the other person. The elf captain and the priest are shocked by his decision. Connelson roars in anger, questioning if Yuto is a fraud. He insists that healing a holy priest is a special honor. The injured elf, Hike, also tells Yuto to give the priest priority. Yuto begins examining the unconscious elf, Saya, noting the location of her chest wound. The elf captain argues that Hike is more severely injured and losing more blood than Saya. He questions why Yuto is prioritizing her. Yuto plunges a needle into Saya's chest. She gasps as air is released from the wound. The onlookers are stunned by the procedure. A gush of air escapes from the needle. Yuto explains she has a hole in her lung, a tension pneumothorax, which is far more dangerous than it appears. The elf captain is speechless. Yuto smiles, saying this procedure has bought them some time until they can get her to the castle for proper treatment. He apologizes for worrying the captain and promises to examine Hike next. The captain apologizes, realizing he still doesn't understand the magician's laws but sees he is trying to help. The priest Connelson sees his chance while everyone is distracted. The dragon lintworm's tail whips out and captures him before he can escape. Connelson screams, begging the fraudulent magician to save him. Yuto calmly tells him that all he knows is that his injuries are classified as minimal. The elf captain asks what Yuto plans to do with the man. Yuto gives a mischievous, tight-lipped smile. The captain doesn't understand why Yuto would save someone so worthless. Yuto's expression is serious and thoughtful. He apologizes, admitting it's his own selfishness. But he cannot abandon people he knows he can save. In a quiet room, a meal is being prepared. An elf's hand stirs a simmering pot. An attendant brings a brewed tea made from the leaves of the world tree to the injured Princess Yuno. Outside, Yuto and his party rush through the castle corridors. They arrive at a room where Captain Minol and other injured elves are resting. They lay the unconscious Saya on a bed. Yuto declares that Saya is now just an injured person and he will prioritize Hike's treatment. The elves, demons, and Korone gather around Hike's bedside. Yuto notes that the bandage is stained but the wound underneath hasn't been cleaned. He asks the injured elf about the pain, realizing they only use the world tree leaves to numb it without cleaning the wound first. Hike admits he can take the pain, but Yuto sees he is suffering greatly. Yuto tells Korone he wants to wash the cuts. Korone prepares supplies for cleaning the wound. Yuto prepares a syringe with local anesthetic. He readies the injection. He He tells Hike that he is now going to widen his wounds. The other elves are shocked by this statement. Captain Minal protests, asking why he would cut someone who is already so badly injured. Princess Yuno intervenes, explaining that if the wound is left as it is, it will only worsen, and that this procedure will help him heal faster. A medical text explains the process of debridement, the removal of necrotic tissue to promote healing. Captain Minal admits they still don't understand Amami-sama's magic. Princess Yuno insists that surely he can see that Yudo is trying to help them. Korone proudly chimes in that her master is amazing, making Yudo blush. The captain relents, entrusting his comrade to Yudo and handing him a pair of surgical scissors. Yudo begins the debridement procedure. He carefully snips away the dead and damaged tissue. The other elves watch with a mixture of horror and fascination. Korone and the queen observe the delicate work. The princess and the captain look on. Yudo gives the patient another injection. He announces that the debridement is complete. He cleans the wound and applies Vaseline. He tells the elves that the wounds are okay now. He promises the injured elf that he will keep examining him until he's all better. The patient, relieved from the pain, smiles gratefully. Captain Minal looks on, beginning to understand. He realizes that this is Sir Amami's magic. Yudo announces he will now continue treating the other patient, Saya. Yuno asks if he is continuing the treatment, and he asks Korone to get his stethoscope. The captain reflects that social standing doesn't matter when saving lives, a way of thinking completely new to him. He looks at Yudo with newfound respect. The queen and princess smile, their trust in him affirmed. Yudo explains Saya's condition, tension pneumothorax, and his plan to insert a chest tube to drain the air. The queen listens and then makes a decision. She declares they will make a place for Sir Amami here at the World Tree. A vision of a bright future for the World Tree appears. The scene shifts to a dark, magic-infused prison cell. The demon Alec tells the captive Kulnilson that the custom-made cell nullifies his magic. Kulnilson grips the bars, trapped and powerless. He screams that they will regret treating a holy priest this way. He rants that their mother was an unhealable dud and that there will now be war. The demons watch him with contempt. Alec tells him the only reason he's alive is because there's no value in killing him. He adds that if war does come, they have no qualms, as his mother is now healed. He punches the bars of the cell, sending a shockwave through the priest. The force of the blow echoes through the dungeon. The demons look on, satisfied. Kulnilson shouts that they are the duds and tells them to get over themselves. Saya sleeps peacefully in her bed. The story shifts to a grand cathedral in the human world. A figure reports to Archbishop Eccles about the priest and deacon sent to the World Tree. The report concludes that they abandoned their healing and were captured. Archbishop Eccles listens with a serene, knowing smile. The chapter ends. An epilogue scene shows Eccles in his study, with an attendant wondering what he is reading. A woman with horns enters the chamber, announcing her arrival. She thanks the assembled council for coming. An elven woman declares the conference will now begin. Elsewhere, a young woman lies gravely ill in her bed. Her life is sustained by a chest drain, a modern medical device Amami has fashioned from 2 bottles to maintain the necessary negative pressure in her thoracic cavity. Back at the conference, the renewal of a pact is discussed. The horned woman confirms she and Alec have no issue with the terms. The elven leader reassures her that what truly matters is her recovery, and minor details will be forgotten. But a single request remains. The horned woman asks that the protection of the elves' country be extended to include YYC. Chancellor Miard questions if this is an ultimatum, forcing them to choose between him and their people. The horned woman argues that the situation only exists because Princess Yuno brought the man to their land in the first place. Another council member admits to being frightened by his presence, yet insists he must remain. A young elf with heart-shaped earrings speaks up, asking that Amami-sama also be allowed to stay. The elven leader reminds Yuno that Sir Amami saved her life, a fact Yuno tearfully confirms. With this, the leader approves the pact's renewal and grants Sir Amami sanctuary within the hollow of the World Tree. Maillard interrupts, asking for a moment before the decision is finalized. She insists they must first ask Sir Amami for his perspective, vowing to summon him at once. In the patient's room, the crude glass bottles of the chest drain rest on the wooden floor. The ill woman continues to sleep, her breathing shallow. Nearby, the ears of a catgirl named Korone twitch with alarm. She rushes to her master, reporting a strange noise coming from the patient's right side with every breath. The young man pulls out a stethoscope to investigate the sound. He identifies the sound of the right lung breathing and instructs Korone to memorize it. He knows that if that sound vanishes, he will have to perform a dangerous chest decompression. Suddenly, the patient's eyes flutter open as Korone shouts with joy that she is finally awake. A horned figure with stark black and white hair parts the curtains and enters the room. His gaze is sharp and focused. The master and the patient stare in shock at the visitor. The master quickly explains that this man found her unconscious in a bush and carried her here. The horned man himself seems surprised by this turn of events. The master promises the patient a swift recovery, though she must endure more pain. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the horned visitor sees a new path forward and thanks the young healer profusely. The patient in bed echoes the sentiment, offering her own thanks. The horned man stands silently by her bedside, watching over her. His expression is lost in thought. The master, Yudo, asks the horned man, Alekuin, what brings him here, offering to get a drink together. Yuto politely declines the offer for now, and Alec walks away down a long, plant-lined corridor. Korone then asks Yudo if she can use the amazing magic tool he was holding earlier. The tool is a stethoscope, a device with a long history stretching back to Hippocrates' method of auscultation and refined in the 19th century by French and American physicians. Yuto encourages her, saying he wants her to learn to use it properly for her own sake. He gently reminds her of the promise she once made to her grandfather. Since he only has one, he suggests they learn to use it together. Korone beams with happiness, thanking Wavsama with all her heart. But Yuto is secretly worried, as his supplies are dwindling rapidly and a new stethoscope is the least of his problems. Just then, Chancellor Maillard arrives, announcing herself on behalf of Her Majesty Melina. She introduces herself formally to a confused Yuto. Yuto's focus immediately shifts to her glasses, and he excitedly asks if he can examine them for a second. Korone peers through the spectacles, amazed to see a real, bona fide lens. Yuto is ecstatic, realizing the immense possibilities a simple lens can provide in this world. He quickly returns the glasses, apologizing for his outburst as a flustered Maillard puts them back on. Now before the council, Maillard asks Amami-sama what he requires of them, but Yuto counters that he has an inquiry of his own. He shifts the topic to the people who were injured. He explains that while their pneumothorax has improved, the wounds from wolves' claws and fangs carry a severe risk of infection, particularly rabies. A council member repeats the unfamiliar word, rabies, as Yuto explains it's a fatal disease transmitted by wild animals with a long incubation period. The horned woman listens intently, acknowledging the gravity of the threat. Yuto confesses he is unsure if rabies even exists in this world, but he must prepare for the worst-case scenario. Maillard asks him to specify what these preparations would entail. He requests the injured be quarantined for regular examination and asks the council to survey the local population for any folktales or symptoms that resemble the disease. Yuto finishes his request, apologizing for being so demanding. The elven leader accepts Sir Amami's terms, entrusting the matter of the injured entirely to him. She then asks how they might compensate him for his extraordinary services. The council deliberates, acknowledging that his medical care far surpasses the expensive magic they have paid for in the past. Yuto humbly refuses any reward, insisting he acted only out of a desire to help and that their hospitality was more than enough. The horned woman challenges his modesty, asking if he means to say her life was of no real concern to him. Flustered, Yuto tries to clarify his intentions as she pretends to be deeply wounded by his words. He decides to explain his true purpose, telling them of a historic medical institution from his homeland, the Koishikawa Inpatient Facility. He recounts how a physician named Ogawa Shaozen established a hospital dedicated to treating all people, regardless of their station. A vision of the ancient doctor in his study flashes through his mind. The elven leader grasps his meaning immediately, asking if he also wishes to create such a place for everyone. Yuto declares that his ambitious dream is to provide medical care to any and all who seek help at the World Tree. The council members sit in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of his proposal. Maillard praises his unwavering dedication to saving lives but states that she has a request of her own. Yuto gives her the floor, and Maillard asks if he would be willing to teach them his medical magic, just as he teaches his disciple Korone. To her complete shock, Yuto eagerly agrees, stating he would love to share his knowledge. He explains that he cannot reach through time and space, so the only way to save countless more lives is to teach as many people as possible. Moved by his selfless vision, the young elf with heart-shaped earrings passionately votes in favor of his plan. The council reaches a decision, agreeing to establish a sanctuary in their country, a place to save all those in need. The scene shifts to a grand city, where a blonde man uses a strange power to heal a venomous wound on a woman's leg. Mystical energy flows from his hand, weaving intricate patterns as he performs the ritual. The woman cries out in joy as her leg is fully restored, praising the bishop Sama for the miracle. The bishop explains that her leg is possessed by a curse, giving her a vial of holy water to drink should it ever return. She pays him with 2 small coins. Standing in the vast cathedral, the woman offers her heartfelt thanks for his divine intervention. His acolytes praise his power, but he humbly claims it is merely the result of proper faith and prayer. One of them questions why such a lowly woman was worthy of God's miracles, but the bishop serenely replies that God created all humans equally. Then, with a contemptuous smirk, he adds that his statement does not apply to the other races. His acolytes laugh among themselves, revealing the holy water was just simple juice made by serfs. A messenger interrupts, summoning Archsama to an emergency papal meeting called by Archbishop Eccles. Arch acknowledges the summons, his gaze sweeping over the imposing cathedral. He walks down a long, opulent hall toward the meeting. Another man calls out to him, asking if he was summoned as well. The man is Sol, a hulking warrior armed with a massive mace. A third figure named Comet stands with them, looking thoroughly unimpressed. Arch asks if they know the reason for the emergency gathering. Sol is clueless, but Comet grumbles, hoping it's not another pointless PR stunt like the recent incident with a slave peddler. Arch realizes their presence means this is no small matter, speculating that all 6 of the legendary 6 stars may have been summoned. Sol expresses doubt, noting that Mio always uses her experiments as an excuse to skip such orders. One of them mutters about unprofitable charity as they approach the ornate doors of the meeting chamber. Inside, several other powerful figures are already assembled. FAA and Zess are among them, a gathering of the land's greatest minds. A regal, horned leader welcomes their arrival. He addresses them all as the 6 stars. He then reveals the grave news. One of their own, the holy priest Konelson, has neglected his duties and been captured at the World Tree. The leader declares that he intends to resolve this crisis immediately to prevent their sacred healing magic from being leaked to the outside world. The 5 assembled stars listen with grim faces, understanding the severity of the situation. Elsewhere, a terrified man peers through the bars of a cage. And in the meeting room, Faith, having arrived far too early, lounges on a couch, bored out of her mind. 2 figures follow a massive, chimeric beast through a lush, overgrown wilderness. A young man's face is shown in vivid detail, his eyes reflecting a galaxy of colors. He ponders deeply, a low hum escaping his lips as he concentrates on a thought. A girl with feline ears addresses him as Yuto-sama, startling him from his reverie as he offers a distracted apology. Another young man named Alec Kuin is approached by a horned girl, Amami, who asks if he is currently creating something. He reveals his grand ambition is to construct a hospital to heal any one of their sicknesses and wounds. He shows his companions the plans he has drawn for this hospital, lamenting that his own time is short. His ultimate goal, he announces, is to write a new text on anatomy, which leaves his friends stunned. This is a nod to the historical Kaitai Shinsho, the first translated text of Western medicine introduced to Japan. He explains his desire to document a dragon's anatomy after operating on one, creating a guide for others like Korone to use. Yet he feels discouraged, as his anatomical text remains unfinished and thus helpful to no one. Amami casually mentions her own recent failure at an attempt to make soap. The scene flashes back to that failure, a stinking mess that brought complaints from others. The process of soap making is explained, from its ancient origins to its chemical properties, as the young man details his own recipe of fat and ash. He champions the importance of soap for preventing disease, while Korone expresses her excitement about its beautifying potential. He dreams aloud of all he could accomplish with his knowledge, from a proper hospital to the necessary tools for treatment. But his hope falters as he considers the immense resources he lacks in this world, knowing his modern supplies are dwindling. The 3 companions walk together, a moment of quiet transition. Amami, sensing his dejection, makes a decisive suggestion. They're going to the pub to talk it over. They arrive at a massive pub built within the hollow of a great tree, where the young boss is greeted warmly. Inside, Amami expresses her delight at finally bringing her friend to this place, and a formidable bartender welcomes them. The owner bellows for his staff to bring their finest alcohol for his special guests. Amami explains that he has a personal rule to avoid drinking as much as possible, prompting an alternative suggestion. The owner offers them to try ether on the second floor, a substance Korone has never heard of. A boisterous dwarf named Normim-san sits at the bar, demanding attention. He drunkenly shouts for more ale and warns the owner not to lead the young man into any mischief. Confused by the word mischief, the young man watches as the dwarf is served another round. The dwarf then offers the young man a drink, advising him to stay with simple booze and avoid other temptations. He takes a hesitant sip, remarking that it isn't chilled, as Amami objects to him drinking at all. He identifies the drink as a fruit-based beverage called Kalwishia, comparing its taste to beer. The dwarf, Normim, is impressed that he can distinguish the ingredients, confirming it's made from grain, unlike the previous fruit drink. The young man mentions that where he comes from, such drinks are called beer or ale and are almost always served chilled. The pub owner then uses a flash of magic to instantly frost the mug of beer solid. He presents the chilled drink, to the astonishment of the group, and Normim immediately begs for one himself. The dwarf takes a massive gulp from the magically chilled mug, his eyes wide. He slams the empty mug down, overwhelmed by the intense, shocking cold. As he roars with exhilaration, Amami forcefully tells him to be quiet. The chapter number 21 is displayed briefly. Normim marvels at this new experience, comparing it to slaying down golden dunes and praising the young man's wisdom about booze. Amami is surprised by his knowledge, given that he doesn't drink, but he explains he used to enjoy alcohol, particularly whiskey. He explains that whiskey is made by distilling other alcohols to increase their strength, which immediately captures the dwarf's interest. The dwarf's eyes gleam with excitement, and he pleads with the young man to tell him everything he knows. Amami intervenes, scolding the dwarf for bothering her friend, but Normim argues that the pursuit of better alcohol is a noble and important business. Amid the chaos, a thought strikes the young man. By repeatedly distilling alcohol, he could produce high-concentration ethanol suitable for disinfection. The dwarf's tone suddenly shifts as he says he has something to discuss. He asks the young man for a favor, which is assumed to be about distillation. However, the dwarf clarifies that he has a different request, asking the doctor to examine his grandchild. The small grandchild is revealed, hiding nervously behind the dwarf's leg. Normim explains that the child suffers from severe constipation and abdominal pain. As payment for the consultation, he promises to make absolutely anything the young man desires. He boasts that dwarves are master blacksmiths and craftsmen, capable of creating whatever is asked of them. The young man insists on commissioning the work properly, not as a form of payment, but the dwarf is adamant about rewarding his skills. Amami skeptically questions if the old dwarf can actually afford their compensation while spending so freely on drinks. The pub owner explains that dragons are hired as security in places prone to fights, such as the Ether Lounge upstairs. The dwarf warns them to stay away from ether, recounting how he has seen countless people become lost to smoking it. Intrigued, the young man wonders if ether is like tobacco, and the owner invites them upstairs to see for themselves. They ascend to the second floor, where Amami calls out to someone named Shia. A woman at the entrance welcomes them and asks if they are there to smoke. The dwarf bellows a greeting, but the woman, Shia, immediately shushes him. She politely requests they keep their voices down to avoid disturbing the other patrons. Amami explains to Shia that for now, they are only there to observe. The group takes in the scene, a dimly lit, smoke-filled room with many patrons lounging about. The patrons are in various states of lethargy, some coughing weakly as they indulge in the substance from ornate pipes. The young man confirms with Amami that these people are all smoking ether. Amami tells him that because he is a good person, she will be blunt about the reality of the situation. She notes that the patrons' expressions show they are not there for mere mischief, but for something much more serious. Shia joins them, agreeing that the situation shouldn't be sugar-coated. She reveals that ether is also known as the breath of God, a substance that grants peace by making one forget incurable pain. The young man is electrified by this revelation, realizing it induces a state of painlessness and sleep. His companions are taken aback by his sudden, intense reaction to this information. He holds up the pipe, seeing not a vice but an essential tool for his work. When asked if he intends to use it, he confirms he does, but only after proper verification. He triumphantly declares that he can use ether as general anesthesia. The missing key to his hospital was here all along. An informational page details the historical discovery of nitrous oxide and its subsequent use as an anesthetic in medicine. The scene shifts to a large, ornate city filled with grand architecture. Inside a chamber, a council of stern-looking individuals is deep in discussion. One member asks if their mission requires killing their target, while another, Comet, pleads for a more peaceful solution. Their leader dismisses the concern, stating their agent's survival is irrelevant, and decides the operative will be chosen by a coin toss. 3 coins, gold, silver, and copper, are brought out for the selection process. The rules are given to guess the outcome of the 3 coins, with one person calling tails, heads, heads. The other members declare their guesses for the coin flip in sequence. The 3 coins are tossed into the air and land on a gloved hand. All 3 coins have landed on tails, meaning a woman named Zess has won the draw. However, a man interjects, claiming someone with better luck is needed and volunteers himself for the mission. The others react with frustration as their established rules are casually ignored. The leader smiles, accepting the volunteer and calling him a man of action despite his few words. The volunteer, now disguised as a merchant named Ransan, is directed to a waiting carriage. The driver of the carriage, mounted on a strange beast, asks for his destination. From the dark interior of the carriage, the man gives his direction to the southwest. He clarifies his final destination, the hollow of the world tree, the country of the elves. Returning to the pub, Amami tells the young man she's glad he found something useful for his plans. He explains his next step is to conduct a clinical trial on the ether. A panel explains the scientific process of clinical trials, which are conducted in phases to test a new drug's safety and efficacy on humans. He begins to strategize, considering who could participate and how to determine the correct dosage. Amami suggests he consult Shia again, since she is the expert on ether and its users. She then expresses her support for his hospital plan and offers to make him any blades he needs, referencing the tools he already ordered. He asks if she can create a large blade for him, for any purpose. The young man simply says, "Oh," in a moment of realization. He notes that it would be useful to have blades of various sizes, but he hesitates, knowing it would require her to injure herself. She reveals that if she had soul silver, she could forge blades without using her own blood. Though she doesn't fully grasp his medical methods, she declares her full support for everything else and resolves to take him to get soul silver. She grabs his hand, excitedly pulling him along to show him this mysterious material. The dwarf Normim remains at the bar, still drinking, proclaiming he will give his all to his work tomorrow. A lone voice calls out for Alekuin as a dragon soars through the clouded sky. A young man riding on its back asks where they are going, while the dragon, Alec, asks if he is cold. Alec promises to light a fire when they land and assures him their destination is already in sight. He points to a massive city surrounding a giant open mine, identifying it as Tazia Mine, a sight that shocks his companion. Alec clarifies that it is the former Dwarven Kingdom. A horned figure with fangs peeks from behind a curtain. They land in the desolate, snow-covered ruins and Alec explains the dwarves left for richer veins, which confuses his companion. Inside an abandoned building, Alec starts a fire and wonders aloud why the dwarves would leave a place famous for soul silver. His companion recognizes the place as Normim Sand's hometown, and Alec confirms the old dwarf stayed until the end. A flashback shows a dwarf vowing to build a hospital to save all those in need. This dwarf, Normim, discusses his grand plan with an elven woman who calls his vision a cut above the rest. The elf queen tells Sir Normim he is essential to their plans and asks for his help. Normim sits alone in the quiet, snow-filled ruins of his country, knowing it is finished but that he is still needed. He swears on his anvil and hammer to meet their expectations, feeling indebted to the elves who gave him purpose. In the present day, an elf tells Normim she had tried to consult with Sir Amami about construction plans, but he was absent. She explains that Alexand took Amami to the abandoned Tazia mine for soul silver, making Normim realize they plan to use the dragon's mana crafting technique. Normim dismisses the mine as a worthless pile of dirt, nothing more than a ruin. The elf princess listens with a worried look. Normim remains confident that they will get the soul silver and return, declaring that in the meantime his own people will do what must be done. He turns toward his forge, ready for the work ahead. Normim rallies the other dwarves, shouting that this is their first big job in a long time. He tells them to put their backs into it, and they respond with a unified roar of, "Yeah." As the dwarves eagerly volunteer for various tasks, Normim calls out and stops a young dwarf named Hugh. Hugh asks his gramp what is wrong, and Normim simply asks if the boy's stomach is okay. Normim pulls the young dwarf into a brief, firm hug. Hugh pulls away cheerfully, insisting he was fine this morning. Normim gently warns him that being stubborn is different from working hard, but Hugh passionately insists he wants to help his grandpa. The boy pleads to be allowed to work and dashes off to get lumber, leaving Normim looking on in stunned silence. Normim stands alone for a moment in the now empty forge. He then lets out a great shout of "Aright!" His resolve hardened. Hugh struggles mightily with an axe but successfully fells a tree. Another dwarf calls out praise for Hugh's good work as the young dwarf proudly carries a massive log on his shoulder. Other dwarves gather around Hugh, showing their concern and suggesting he take a break for his stomach's sake. Hugh laughs off their worries, claiming he's fine and just has a little trouble pooping sometimes, which makes the others chuckle. Suddenly, a look of shock and pain flashes across Hugh's face. He clutches his stomach, confused and muttering that he was just fine a moment ago. An older dwarf shouts his name in alarm as Hugh collapses to the ground. Another dwarf turns and runs, shouting for the chief. He bursts onto the scene announcing that Hugh has collapsed. Normim frantically orders another dwarf named Nino to take him to the castle immediately. The dwarves crowd around Hugh's bedside while Normim desperately calls out to him, begging him to speak. Normim turns to a cat-eared girl, demanding she do something, but she is powerless as another girl, Coronason, arrives. The elf princess asks Korone if there is another way, and Korone suggests calling for Amami-sama to return. Normim objects, yelling that it takes 2 days on horseback to reach Tazzium, a deadly delay with Hugh in such a condition. The two girls look on, their faces masks of shock and fear. A massive, ethereal lion appears before them, which they recognize as the forest god. The princess asks in disbelief if the forest god will truly go to Amami-sama. Korone volunteers to guide the forest god on the journey. The dwarves watch as the desperate plan takes shape. The princess observes Hugh's still form, wondering if she can place her trust in these humans. Elsewhere, a man in a bed thinks to himself that in the end, he cannot rely on them. The dwarves give the princess, Lindworm-sama, a warm cloak for her journey. She thanks them gratefully and declares she must reach Amami-sama with all possible speed. A blur of motion signifies the start of their urgent journey. A woman apologizes to Normim, explaining that her son Alec has not yet returned and she must go check on him. Normim tells her it is not her fault, his anger is solely from his own helplessness to save Hugh. He calculates that even at top speed, they will not return before midnight, leaving the boy to suffer for hours. Standing alone in the falling snow, Normim quietly wonders if he is about to lose someone else. He cannot stand the thought of losing anyone more. The group keeps a grim vigil over the suffering boy. Back in the mine, Amami asks Alec if they are in an old hospital building, as a disembodied voice prays for its master to return. Alec talks about their plans for the ether they discovered and the equipment they can make with soul silver. He expresses his desire to push forward and find a place for their work, even though they lack some tools. A flashback reveals a conversation about recruiting the oldie, Normim, for a construction project, calling him strong and reliable, though very loud. In the present, Alec and Amami stand before a dark, imposing staircase leading down into an underground tunnel. As they make their long descent, Alec warns Amami to conserve his energy, noting they have already passed the 20th floor. They emerge into a vast, dark, and dilapidated cavern. Amami marvels at the sheer size and darkness of the place before Alec unleashes a brilliant flash of light. The light reveals the massive, draconic form of Alec, startling Amami with a shouted "Eeh!" The brilliant light from Alec's draconic form begins to fade. The cavern is once again plunged into total darkness. Alec mutters that it's pitch black again and decides to use his penlight, having expected something in the cavern to ignite. He says he needs to find a torch or candle to test the oxygen levels. Suddenly, Amami cries out as his face is covered by a thick, sticky substance. Alec hears Amami's muffled cries and rushes to help him, calling his name. Amami spits out the mass of webbing with a pois, and thanks Alec for his help. He pulls at the sticky strands and realizes it's a spider's web. Alec, in his dragon form, uses his tail to slap away enormous sheets of webbing. He realizes that something has made a home in the mine since his last visit. He roars in frustration, telling the unseen creature to get lost. Alec turns to Amami and tells him that clearing a path is going to take some time. Back at the dwarven castle, a new person arrives, announcing her presence. A young woman carrying a staff steps forward and politely asks to be allowed to help the sick child. The dwarves react with immediate hostility and shock. Normim recognizes the woman as the human who ran away from Princess Lintworm's medical treatment. The woman and the princess lock eyes in a tense standoff. Normim furiously denies her request, yelling that he cannot trust someone like her and would kill her without hesitation if she failed. The woman pleads that she only wants to help, at least until the man they are waiting for returns. She turns to the princess and apologizes for running away, vowing that she won't do it again. The princess asks her companion Korone what she thinks, and what their master, Yudo-san, would do. Korone recalls her master and says he would definitely ask for help in this situation. The princess addresses Normim, stating she will let bygones be bygones since she is an outsider there. She advises him that accepting the specialist's help is better than letting his grandson continue to suffer. Normim listens, his face a portrait of agony and indecision. Hugh cries out from the bed, telling his grandpa that he wants her help and wants her to examine him. The boy gasps that yesterday the pain was in the middle of his tummy, but today it has moved to the right side, a detail that catches Korone's attention. Normim finally relents and begs the Miss Magician, to save his grandson Hugh, and she replies that her name is Saya. The name Saya seems to trigger a memory for someone present. Saya stands poised with her staff, ready to help. In another time, a man in bed decides he no longer wants to escape, figuring that only more trouble awaits him outside anyway. Saya stands with her staff, a determined figure among ruins and onlookers. She watches over Hugh's bedside with Normim and Lintworm as the boy groans in pain. Upon inspection, Saya identifies the boy's condition as a combination of deposits and a severe mana buildup. These terms are explained. Deposits means a stocky build, while mana buildup is a painful curse, and she notes a significant hardness in his abdomen. A look of understanding dawns in Saya's eye as she formulates a plan. She asks for leaves of the world tree to be prepared, intending to use them to relieve Hugh's pain. Korone immediately offers a brew she prepared earlier, while Lintworm departs to gather more just in case. Saya announces that she will now commence the treatment. A memory flashes through her mind of a man urging her to flee a collapsing structure. She recalls being told that some things simply cannot be healed, a sentiment she questioned even then. She affirms her own selfish desire to never abandon someone she knows she can save. Her thoughts drift to Amami's kind and reassuring smile. She remembers his bravery in standing up for his beliefs and feels a renewed desire to become stronger, just like him. She is tired of losing something precious every time she runs away from a challenge. In a parallel scene, Alekuin tells Amami to stay back, determined to settle the fight with the mine's creature himself. He swiftly dodges a volley of sharp projectiles shot from the darkness. Alekuin unleashes a powerful blast of dragon energy that explodes within the cavern. Through the dust and smoke, he finally spots the giant spider lurking in the shadows. The creature launches another volley of projectiles in a swift counterattack. One of the projectiles strikes Alekuin's arm, sizzling and burning on impact. Amami shouts that the creature spoke and they might be able to communicate, but Alekuin is distracted by the searing pain. Alekuin dismisses the idea of talking but warns Amami not to let his guard down. Amami takes out a pen and begins to write, attempting to communicate through another means. The creature is revealed to be a young girl with the lower body and extra limbs of a spider. She sits on the cavern floor, looking vulnerable despite her monstrous appearance. Amami is stunned to realize their attacker is a girl and wonders what provoked her. She seems to be guarding something on the ground, glaring defensively at them. He then notices she is trembling as she shields a clutch of large, pulsating eggs. Amami immediately apologizes, understanding that their sudden fire likely scared her into protecting her unhatched children. He tells her he sees now that she was only trying to protect the kids behind her. He offers another sincere apology for having frightened her and her family. The spider girl looks up, her expression a mixture of surprise and fear, with tears welling in her eyes. Alekuin adds his own apology, explaining that it was too dark to see clearly before he attacked. The girl is flustered and suspicious, thinking it's a trick and they plan to kill her after apologizing. Amami explains their true purpose. They came to the mine to collect some soul silver. She holds up a large, glowing crystal, confirming she found some because it was pretty and offers it if they will spare her life. As she moves to give it to them, she winces and cries out in pain from a fresh burn on her leg. Amami notices her injury and asks if he can check her leg, an offer she immediately misinterprets as a threat. She asks him what he's going to do when he clarifies his only intention is to treat the wound. The forest god suddenly arrives, carrying Yuno-san on its back. Amami and his companions are shocked to see the divine beast and their friend in the depths of the mine. Yuno-san urgently explains that she is there because of Hugh, Normim-sama's grandson. A cryptic text appears, speaking of potency against fiends and bewitching wights. Back at the castle, Saya is drenched in sweat, pouring her magical energy into treating Hugh. Lintworm observes with concern that Saya is suffering from mana deficiency and will kill herself if she continues to push so hard. Normim looks on with alarm as Saya trembles from the extreme effort. Hugh continues to writhe in agony, his condition unchanged. Nino points out to Normim that despite Saya's immense effort, Hugh's state has not improved at all. Saya insists that her approach is correct, as purification magic should be the most effective counter to the evil spirits in his stomach. She remembers Amami's smile, drawing strength from the memory. Pushing through her exhaustion, Saya offers a weak smile and insists she is just fine, apologizing for worrying them. Normim and the others can only watch as she stands against her own pain to help Hugh. Lintworm steps in to support the swaying magician, telling her she can only do so much on her own. Saya's eyes fly open as she musters her remaining strength for one last push. She continues to channel her magic into Hugh, refusing to give up even as her own energy fails. A powerful sound suddenly echoes from the distant world tree. Startled, Saya, Lintworm, and Korone all look up towards the source of the sound. Korone recognizes the sound of their arrival as Lintworm praises Saya for not throwing in the towel. Lintworm reassures the exhausted Saya that help is finally here now. The group tumbles ungracefully off the back of the forest god as it arrives at the castle. A close-up on Amami's eyes shows his focus as he announces he's kept them waiting. Korone joyfully greets her master, who immediately asks for a report and permission to examine the patient. Saya relays the symptoms. The patient Hugh-sen has a burning fever, shivers, and a striking hardness in his stomach. She gives her diagnosis that he is possessed by evil spirits. Amami questions the vague diagnosis of evil spirits, which the local magicians seem to blame for everything from abscesses to diarrhea, and he wonders if it's like what he calls germs. Saya explains that she judged purification magic to be effective because she assumed dwarven bodies were like others and that evil spirits were nesting inside. She admits with despair that despite her best efforts, she was completely unable to purify the affliction. Amami asks her to hold on, stating he wants to check something important before proceeding. He then asks a critical question that no one had considered. Is a dwarf's body actually built the same as a human's? Saya confesses she has never verified this herself, as discussing such things is forbidden by the archbishop whose teachings she follows. Amami decides he must examine the boy himself to confirm the anatomy. He pulls out a stethoscope and begins a physical examination of Hugh's abdomen. He is shocked by the incredible stiffness, identifying it as muscular defense, a symptom of peritonitis. When he presses a specific point on the boy's abdomen, Hugh screams in pain. Recalling that the pain moved from the center to the right side, Amami pieces the symptoms together and makes a definitive diagnosis: appendicitis. He explains to the horrified Normim that appendicitis is a disease where the appendix in the lower right abdomen becomes swollen and inflamed. An informational page details the grim history of appendicitis, which was a deadly disease with a 60% mortality rate before the cause was identified and surgery became viable. Normim desperately asks if Amami can fix it, as a medical diagram shows the location of McBurney's point and other classic signs of appendicitis. Amami turns to Saya and asks if purification magic is the standard treatment for such an abdominal condition. Saya confirms that the archbishop teaches that purification magic is the correct method, though it only works instantly on weaker spirits. Amami reveals a small bottle of antibiotic, explaining it's a drug he uses for mild cases that may have a similar effect to her magic. A panel explains that preservative treatment with antibacterial agents can be a useful initial treatment for appendicitis in cases without severe complications. Korone and Saya are astonished by the idea of a medicine that has the same power as purification magic. Amami weighs his options, concerned about the risk of relapse and torn between using his limited supply of modern antibiotics or their purification magic. He decides on a course of action and asks Alec-kun to summon Shia-san. As Alec-kun transforms and flies off, Lintworm asks how Amami intends to use the ether. He explains that he cannot shrink down to enter the body this time, so he must perform surgery to remove the appendix, shocking Norman. He clarifies that he will use ether to put Hugh to sleep during the surgery so he feels no pain, insisting it's the only way to heal him. Shia arrives, brought swiftly by Alekuin, and asks if she is needed there. Norman stares at Shia, his face a mask of suspicion and dread. He confronts Amami, remembering he said the ether needed to be verified, meaning it is a dangerous thing that might not even work. The old dwarf admits that ether scares him because he has seen what it does to those who use it. He forbids Amami from using the substance on Hugh if there's any chance it won't take away the pain. Shia watches Normam's passionate plea with a calm, unreadable expression. Normam then makes a shocking proposal to Shia, asking her to please test the ether on him. He offers his own life, begging them to do whatever it takes to save Hugh. The entire room is stunned into silence by the grandfather's selfless sacrifice. A tense silence hangs over the curtained bed where Hugh lies ill. Shia sits with Normam, ready to administer the test, as he looks grimly at his grandson. An informational page describes the history of modern anesthesia, which began with an experiment using ether in 1846. Shia hands the ether pipe to Normam, who accepts it with a quiet thanks. He inhales deeply from the pipe, his face contorting with effort and resolve. The onlookers all gasp and cry out in shock and awe. A black, viscous liquid drips from Normam's mouth as the drug takes effect. He strikes his own arm with a hammer, then laughs, proclaiming that it's true, it doesn't hurt at all. He loses consciousness and slumps over, and Shia gently tugs his hand to confirm he is fully under. He remains completely limp and unresponsive. Shia turns to the stunned group and calmly announces that it is all right to proceed. In another room, a nervous elf asks someone to come see something unusual. Amami uses wet gauze to wipe a surface clean in preparation for the surgery. A traveler in a dark coat and hat is asked to show his passport by a guard. At a great stone gate, 2 elven guards inspect the document by the light of a staff. One guard addresses the traveler as Merchant Randano, asking if his visit is for business or pleasure. From beneath his hat, the merchant confirms he is there on business, of course. The guards are satisfied and grant him permission to pass. A diagram lays out an array of surgical tools including gauze, scalpels, needles, and sutures. A numbered key corresponds to the different types of medical instruments shown. More advanced tools are listed, such as various scissors, forceps, and retractors. Back in the operating room, Lintworm tells Amami that she will wait just outside and to call her if anything happens. Amami turns to Alekuin, asking if he has any disinfected pans available. Alekuin presents a simple metal tray, and Amami looks at it with an idea forming in his mind. Using a piece of soul silver, Alekuin's draconic magic flashes as he forges new tools on the spot. A swirl of energy and light fills the room as the metal is shaped. 3 brand new, perfectly formed scalpels now rest in the pan, still glowing hot from their creation. An informational page explains the process of flame sterilization, where articles are heated to kill microbes. Amami gratefully accepts the 3 sharp blades, and Alekuin confirms the heat should have taken care of any bacteria. Shia and Saya decide to also wait outside, leaving Amami with his surgical assistants. Outside the room, Saya expresses her deep unease, stating that cutting someone open with blades is a great taboo for her people. The entire group waits anxiously in the hall, their faces etched with worry. Korone asks her master what they should do now, wondering if it's time to administer medicine. Amami stops her and explains that first, everyone present must change into disposable clothes he has prepared. Korone, now wearing a surgical cap and mask, confirms that she can hear his instructions. He explains that the special clothing is necessary to minimize the risk of bacteria during the procedure. He then announces that before they use ether, another type of anesthetic must be administered while Hugh is still conscious. He asks Korone to hold Hugh in a specific pose, curled up with his knees to his chest. Korone confirms she understands and gently but firmly holds the patient in position. Now fully garbed in surgical attire, Amami tells the conscious Hugh that he is about to touch him. He carefully feels along the boy's lower back, identifying the top of the iliac crest to find Jacoby's line. He apologizes in advance, warning Hugh that the next step is going to hurt a bit. He applies pressure with his thumb to mark the exact spot for the injection. He presses firmly, causing Hugh to cry out in pain from the pressure. Amami expresses his hope that he has found the right spot, as hitting a vertebra would be a disastrous error. An informational panel with a diagram of the lower spine explains that Jacobi's line is a key anatomical landmark for safely administering spinal anesthesia between the L4 and L5 vertebrae. Amami instructs Yuno-san to fill a small bowl with povidone, which she does immediately. He then prepares a syringe filled with lidocaine, telling Hugh this local anesthetic is going to sting. He administers the injection, apologizing as Hugh flinches from the sharp pain. He then picks up a long, specialized Tui needle from his instrument tray. He calmly instructs Hugh to let him know if he feels any pain or numbness in his arms or legs. He warns the boy that he is now about to feel another prick in his back. With steady hands, he carefully inserts the Tui needle into the marked spot. He feels a subtle pop as the needle passes through the ligaments between the vertebrae. He continues to advance the needle slowly and carefully, feeling for the correct depth. A diagram illustrates the path of the needle, showing it entering the spinal subarachnoid space. An info panel details the history of spinal anesthesia, first performed in Germany with cocaine in 1898 and in Japan with morphine just 2 years later. He removes the inner needle from the cannula, and a clear liquid begins to drip from the hub. He breathes a sigh of relief, confirming that the dripping liquid is spinal fluid. A panel explains that the colorless cerebrospinal fluid surrounds the brain and spine, and that its collection is a common diagnostic procedure. Amami calls for the catheter to be brought to him. He carefully threads the thin, flexible catheter through the hollow Tui needle. Once it is inserted about 15 centimeters, he gently removes the outer needle, leaving the catheter in place. He secures the end of the catheter to Hugh's back with surgical tape and attaches a filter and adapter. With the spinal tap successfully in place, he turns and asks Shia-san to please begin. He entrusts the delicate task to her, asking that she give Hugh enough ether to ensure he won't wake up from extreme pain. Shia looks down at the terrified Hugh and reassures him, promising she will not break the vow she made to his grandfather. Hugh's breathing becomes deep and even as he falls into a state of general anesthesia, a process detailed in an informational panel. Amami and his assistants, all masked and ready, look on with focus. He instructs Shia to keep the patient unconscious until the entire surgery is complete. With all preparations made, Amami announces he will now begin the appendectomy by making an incision in the stomach. He tells Korone she will be his instrument nurse and asks her to hand him the roundest of the scalpels Alekuin made. He takes the scalpel from Korone and positions it over McBurney's point, preparing to make a 5 centimeters incision in the skin. Korone and Yuno-san watch with nervous anticipation as the blade touches the patient's skin. Blood wells up as the scalpel slices cleanly through the first layer of tissue. He measures the cut with his fingers, confirming it is long enough to proceed. The 3 masked assistants stare with wide, focused eyes at the open wound. Amami asks Korone to hand him a piece of gauze. He gently blots the blood from the incision with the gauze, clearing his view. An info panel explains the function of forceps as he uses a pair to lift the layer of subcutaneous fat. He notes that the dwarf's fat layer is much thicker than he expected, but the sharpness of Alekuin's scalpels allows him to cut through it. After successfully dissecting the fat, he sets down his tools with a sigh of relief. He then calls for the retractors to be handed to him. A panel explains that retractors are essential tools used to hold open layers of tissue and provide a clear view of the surgical field. The retractors are inserted, pulling back the fatty tissue to reveal the superficial fascia beneath. He instructs a visibly nervous Korone to hold the retractors and keep the surgical field expanded. He then takes back the round scalpel and barbed forceps to continue the procedure. He slowly and carefully makes an incision in the thin layer of fascia. This reveals the aponeurosis of the abdominal external oblique muscle. He calls for the sharp-edged scalpel, and a hesitant Korone speaks up. She asks nervously if the bad thing they need to remove is located even deeper inside him. He confirms that it is, explaining they still need to cut through the internal oblique muscle and the peritoneum to reach the inflamed appendix. He begins to cut along the fibers of the aponeurosis with delicate, precise movements. The incision reveals the next layer of abdominal muscle. He calls for Mayo scissors and a self-retaining retractor to proceed to the next layer. The self-retaining retractor is applied to hold the muscle layer open. He points out the now visible abdominal internal oblique muscle, and Korone realizes they must be getting close to the appendix. Using his fingers and the scissors, he gently parts the muscle fibers, and the incision opens further. He tells Korone to reposition the retractors now that they are deeper inside the abdominal wall. He identifies the semilunar line and announces he will now cut through the transverse abdominal muscle with pea scissors. He makes another careful cut with the scissors. He announces they have finally reached the peritoneum and tells Korone she can take a short break while he reapplies the self-retaining retractor. Korone is visibly sweating and exhausted from the tension of holding the retractor steady. Yuno-san kindly wipes the sweat from Korone's brow as she continues to focus on her task. Amami instructs Korone to take 2 non-barbed forceps and use them to hold up the very middle of the peritoneum membrane. Korone confirms she understands and carefully follows his instructions. With the peritoneum held taut, he makes the final incision to enter the abdominal cavity. He picks up a pair of scissors, stating that they are almost at the appendix with just one more cut. However, the moment he pierces the peritoneum, a section of intestine immediately bulges out of the opening. The entire surgical team gasps in shock at this sudden and dangerous complication. Outside the room, Nino hears the commotion and lets out a shriek of terror. He tries to force his way into the room to see what happened to Hugh, but Alec-kun physically blocks his path. Nino shouts that he never trusted this absurd idea of curing someone by cutting them open. He furiously demands that Alec-kun get out of his way so he can ensure Hugh is safe. Alec-kun stands firm, refusing to move and stating he will not budge an inch. He tells Nino that he doesn't want him to repeat the same mistakes he has made. He calmly explains that the only thing they can do right now is to believe and wait. Nino is left speechless, his anger giving way to helpless worry. He apologizes for getting riled up, and Alec-kun accepts, reiterating that there is only one thing they can do now. And that is to believe in Amami. Inside, Amami struggles against the internal pressure, trying to push the protruding intestines back into the abdominal cavity. Korone asks in a panic what is happening, and he explains that high gut pressure forced the intestines out. He urgently asks Yuno-san to bring him the yellow one, referring to the spinal anesthetic. He instructs Shia to remove the cap from the filter on Hugh's back and connect it to the syringe. Shia injects the medicine through the catheter, and Korone asks her master what it is. Amami explains it is spinal anesthesia, a different type he set up for a reason other than just pain management. He reassures his team that while it will take a moment to work, everything should be fine now. Korone looks at the incision and exclaims in relief that the intestines are not popping out anymore. Amami explains that the lidocaine, when used in the spinal space, also acts as a powerful muscle relaxant, stopping the abdominal muscles from contracting and forcing the intestines out. An info panel adds that spinal anesthesia is fast-acting and a strong muscle relaxant but can have the side effect of lowering blood pressure, limiting its duration. A moment of quiet settles over the operating room. The tension eases as the complication is brought under control. The path to the appendix is finally clear. The team readies themselves for the next crucial step. The critical phase of the surgery is about to begin. In the midst of the operation, Amami identifies the tinea libera, a band of muscle running along the intestine. He carefully follows it through the surgical field, using it as a guide. If a dwarf's anatomy is like a human's, he reasons, this will lead him straight to his target. There it is, just as the anatomy foretold, the grotesquely swollen appendix. An anatomical diagram details the location of the appendix at the end of the cecum, explaining its role in the immune system. Korone watches in awe, realizing she is seeing the appendix, the source of the illness, for the first time. Amami observes that while the appendix is severely inflamed, the surrounding tissue is surprisingly healthy. He realizes with a start that this must be the result of Saya's purification magic. He turns to her and expresses his gratitude, believing her magic prevented the inflammation from spreading and becoming worse. Tears well up in Saya's eyes as she realizes her efforts were not in vain and that she was truly useful. Amami briefly ponders the mysterious mechanics of magic but forces himself to focus on the task at hand. He explains to his assistants that they must first block the artery to prevent bleeding before removing the organ. He asks a nervous Yuno-san to take over for him and hold an instrument securely in place. As she takes the tool, he calls for a suture, and her eyes widen with apprehension. He skillfully passes the suture needle around the base of the appendix to ligate the blood vessel. He pulls the thread, beginning to tie the crucial knot. He concentrates intently, knowing the ligature must be perfectly tightened to prevent bleeding. With the knot secured, the blood supply to the appendix is successfully cut off. He then calls for the Mayo scissors to complete the step. With a pair of scissors, he cleanly snips the ends of the suture thread. His assistants watch the delicate procedure with breathless focus. the thread is cut, and the ligature is complete. Korone exclaims with relief that the patient is not bleeding, and Amami thanks Yuno-san for her steady hands. He announces it is finally time to remove the appendix, but first, they must clamp it to prevent leakage. Using pin forceps, he firmly clamps the top of the appendix near its base. Korone watches his every move, her expression a mix of nervousness and concentration. He applies a second clamp a little further up from the first. He then asks for a needle with a threaded suture to prepare the stump. He begins applying stitches in a circle around the base of the appendix. He repeats the stitch 5 times, creating a purse string pattern. With the suture in place, the site is prepared for the final step. He asks Yuno-san to take over his left hand and clamp the tool again. She trembles but follows his instructions, and he calmly reassures her that everything is fine. Yuno-san clamps down as instructed, her eyes wide with focus and determination. Amami reassures her that she is doing perfectly and to just hold it steady. He prepares a new, thicker suture for the next step. He explains that he will now make a ligature on the clamped part of the appendix stump. He quickly and cleanly snips the threads of the ligature. With the stump securely tied off, he is ready to proceed. Holding a sharp-edged scalpel, he announces that he will now be removing the appendix. His entire team watches with bated breath, their eyes wide above their masks. He makes the final, decisive cut with the scalpel. He uses forceps to lift the severed appendix and places it into a kidney dish. The assistants let out a collective sigh as Korone announces that it's off. Amami instructs his slime companion to take the removed appendix away. He then uses a fresh cotton ball to disinfect the remaining stump with povidone. He asks Yuno-san to hold the ends of the purse string suture he placed earlier. As she holds the threads taut, he slowly cuts them. He thanks Yuno-san for her help, telling her that's all for now. The next step, he explains, is to push the stump back into the cecum. He carefully inverts the stump into the opening from which it came. The stump is now tucked away neatly inside the large intestine. He pulls on the purse string suture, using it like a drawstring to close the hole. He ties off the suture, creating a neat, cross-stitched seal. With the stump secured, he announces that they have successfully dealt with the appendix. He praises Korone and Yuno for their good work as his assistants. But he reminds them that the surgery is not over yet, as they still must neatly close the boy's stomach. Korone, filled with a new sense of purpose, affirms that she is ready to keep at it. Outside the room, Norman begins to slowly awaken from the effects of the ether. The group waiting outside watches him stir with concern. Shia emerges from the operating room and announces that it is done. The dwarves, led by Nino, immediately rush toward the door, asking if Hugh is okay. A freshly awakened Norman sees Amami and smiles. Amami informs the chief that Hugh is all right and sleeping soundly. The room erupts in celebration as the dwarves lift Amami and Alikuin in the air. Saya watches the joyous scene, a look of quiet awe on her face. The dwarves praise Amami for dealing with a nasty evil spirit, and Saya wonders if someday she could do the same. A close-up on Saya's wide, hopeful eyes. Normim tells the celebrating dwarves to quiet down so they don't wake Hugh. He then bows his head deeply to Amami. He declares he will never forget this and will no longer call him laddie. He shakes Amami's hand, calling him sensei, and pledging to be in his care from now on. The narrator declares the appendectomy completed. The focus shifts to the next major project, the construction of the hospital. The dwarves hold a feast, toasting to Amami-sensei and to Hugh's recovery. They all raise their mugs in a hearty cheers. Saya is shown in new clothes given to her by Shia, with text about her standing against pain and venom. She admires her new outfit. The text continues, describing her as potent against malicious wights and great guile. Korone and the others thank Saya for her hard work. Saya demurs, but Korone insists the master was grateful and that her magic prevented a post-surgery infection. Normim asks Hugh how his tummy feels, and the boy declares it's completely fine. Normim tearfully thanks everyone, saying he couldn't have done a thing on his own. He expresses his gratitude not only to Amami-sensei but to all of them. The girls smile and say he's welcome. Alikuin arrives, looking for Amami. He asks Normim why he isn't at the drinking party, and the dwarf says he's not drinking for a while, still worried about Hugh. Normim enthusiastically promises to build a grand, out-of-this-world hospital for Amami-sensei. Alikuin smiles faintly. He tells the others that Amami has already gone home. Normim explains that Amami kept on working even after the surgery was over. Korone tells a shocked Alekuin that her master was staggering from exhaustion when Normim carried him home. Alekuin goes to Amami's room. He finds Amami amidst a stinking mess, having passed out while trying to make soap again. He scolds the exhausted Amami for working when he should be resting. He tells Amami he needs to count on them more instead of working himself so hard. Amami confesses that he was panicking during the surgery, unsure if a dwarf's body could be treated the same way as a human's. He explains that since all his knowledge is from another world, he felt he had to keep doing everything he could himself. He worries that their success was just a coincidence and that he has no idea what will happen the next time a crisis occurs. Alekuin sits with him. Alekuin reassures him, saying that if Amami can't heal someone, nobody can, so he shouldn't worry so much. Alekuin admits that he is worried about Amami. A grateful Amami thanks Alekuin. A knock is heard on a door in the elven country. A voice from inside asks, "What is it?" And the merchant Ran answers, "Human nature." A man with glasses welcomes Sir Ran inside. Inside a cluttered room, the man asks Ran how it's looking. Ran reports that he's heard some bad statements about humans recently, but he adds that they don't seem to be planning on doing anything for the time being. The man asks if information about healing magic has been leaked. He reassures Ran not to worry, as rumor is they've left Kolnelson alone. The conversation between the spies continues in secret. Plans are discussed in the dimly lit, cluttered room. The fate of many hangs on the information being exchanged. A new scheme begins to take shape. The chapter concludes on a note of political intrigue. The merchant Ran continues his secret mission within the elven country. Here Rim made it. The man in the lab coat holds it up in disbelief, exclaiming that this is amazing and looks just like the clothes the master always wears. A winged figure confirms the steroid salve has healed her leg and praises the delicious food she received. A small girl with a spider on her head pleads with Yuho-san, asking if she and her friends can stay, promising they can make more clothes. An elf-like woman smiles and happily welcomes Rim-san to the World Tree Cave, promising to tell the queen about her arrival. The group erupts in a joyous swoop. Suddenly, a voice demanding to know about the ruckus startles the spider girl, who lets out Anike. A figure with small horns appears, informing Amami that it's time for the public lecture. The happy group is shown enjoying a feast together, laughing and eating. A large crowd gathers outside, their chatter filling the air as they announce it's almost time. The audience stands in anticipation, buzzing that the magician Amami's public lecture is starting now. At the entrance, a horned guard apologetically asks a woman to see her bag, needing to check for anything dangerous. Another man wishes there was a wadjet to speed things up, but a guard lets him pass upon seeing he's empty-handed. It's explained that a wadjet is a creature that can see straight through bags, which would simplify security. The guard complains that he's never seen a wadjet at the World Tree and insists on checking everything thoroughly, knowing how bad it would be if anything happened today. The extra caution is necessary because their neighbors from the Night Country are visiting. A close-up reveals the sharp, observant eye of one of the visitors. An elf woman asks her companion if the visitors are diplomats. Her companion confirms they are the vampires who arrived yesterday and were invited to the lecture after they showed interest. Two of the vampires, a man with long dark hair and another with glasses, observe the proceedings. A woman with a staff asks with concern if they are really going to tell even foreigners about their healing magic. Amami's companions express worry about the makeshift stage, but are reassured that it's no problem. The horned individual explains that this public lecture is being held for the sake of spreading knowledge. She clarifies that according to Amami himself, he wants as few people as possible to suffer. Amami stands at the podium and announces, "I'm ready." He greets the crowd warmly, thanking them for coming and stating his desire to make them more aware of bacteria. He prompts a young boy named Hyukuen, who correctly identifies bacteria as the tiny, invisible evil guys who made his stomach hurt. Amami excitedly confirms the boy's answer is right. He then tells the crowd he has asked Normim-san to make tools that will allow them to see these bacteria. A boy in the audience raises his hand and asks a good question. If they can't see them normally, how can they deal with them? Amami presents a flask of meat soup he made a few days ago, which now reeks and looks awful. The boy realizes that the stomach aches from eating old food are caused by bacteria multiplying in it. Next, Amami reveals another container, which an audience member recognizes as a strange glass thing the boss made. The crowd is amazed that this meat soup looks perfectly fine, and Amami explains it is a swan neck flask that bacteria have a hard time entering. A text box details the history of the swan neck flask, used by Louis Pasteur to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation and advance bacteriology. When an audience member points out they don't have swan neck flasks, Amami lists other ways to limit bacteria in food, such as storing it at low temperatures, salting it, or keeping it airtight. A pirate-like man holding a piece of salted meat has a moment of insight, exclaiming that's why it lasts so long. Amami explains that since unseen bacteria are all around them and will multiply, they must consider what can be done to stop them from entering their bodies. A small child tentatively suggests the answer is to wash their hands. Amami enthusiastically declares that is exactly the answer he was looking for. He elaborates that they must wash whatever they use to grab their food with running water. The crowd cheers with understanding, thanking Sensei and vowing to wash their hands to keep illness away. One of the visiting vampires observes the scene with a smile, remarking what an interesting person Amami is. His companion, Costa, grimly states that humans stand above other races because of their monopoly on healing magic and questions if they can leave this guy alone. Costa's eyes widen with fury as he declares this is a root of evil the likes of which they've never seen, and they must report it to the church immediately. The report is to be delivered to Archbishop Eccles. The scene changes to a ruined city street where a child plays dangerously close to unstable rubble. The child stumbles, falling into peril. A moment of intense danger is barely averted. A dark-haired woman catches the child, scolding the nearby men for not looking after her properly. The rescuer gently tells the little girl she should stay closer to people who will keep an eye on her. In a dilapidated market street, one of the men calls out an apology to his sis. The girl's father approaches to thank the woman, who explains she isn't the girl's dad but just someone people know around here. The man notes the large crowd, and the woman explains that many people from far away have just arrived. A different girl runs excitedly through the street, calling for Matkin. The woman who saved the child seems irritated by Marsh's presence, asking why he is in the slums and telling him to leave if he's going to be rude. The running girl arrives, frantically shouting that Marshniken fell and hurt himself. Marshniken is shown on the ground, clutching his leg and crying out that it really hurts. One of the blonde vampires steps forward, extending his hand and calmly saying, "Hold on, I'll fix it right away." He begins to perform an act of healing. The woman who had saved the child earlier looks on in absolute astonishment. The blonde healer gently asks the injured boy, "Doesn't hurt anymore, right?" Marshniken leaps to his feet, laughing and kicking his healed leg, shouting that it's all better and the healer is amazing. As the crowd thanks Marshniken, the healer, whose name is also Marsh, waves and tells the boy not to fall anymore. An old man approaches Mr. Marsh, apologizing for bothering him with just a scrape and for being unable to pay him. Marsh smiles and says not to worry, as he isn't a licensed healer and simply does what he wants to do. As an announcement rings out that food is ready, one of the villagers mutters about the outsider before trailing off. The slums residents are shown lining up cheerfully, receiving ladles of hot food from large communal pots. The scene widens to show the lively community gathered amongst the ramshackle wooden buildings. The old man tells Marsh that this vibrant atmosphere is all thanks to him, but Marsh humbly replies that he is just doing what he can. A group of young men rush to Marsh, calling him Big Bro, and offering him a bowl of food, but he insists he will line up like everyone else. The old man explains that the young men have felt eternally grateful to Marsh ever since he cured that disease that spread from the red light district. Marsh accepts their offer and takes a spoonful, remarking that it's tasty, which delights the men. The man explains that a woman named Atna did her best with the food, wanting Marsh to at least have a good meal. He then recalls Atna's own healing, stating he has never seen anyone make a complete recovery from the burning face curse and that only Marsh could have done it. Marsh deflects the praise, claiming any priest could have cured it with holy water and that the girl's own fortitude played a part. The man scoffs, saying the church would never help penniless people like them and that they've never even seen holy water before. He concedes that perhaps the famed 6 stars would have done something for them. Marsh turns away slightly, repeating the name as a question, the 6 stars. The man clarifies they are the 6 who work directly under the great Archbishop Eccles, some of whom are rumored to wander and heal the poor, just like Marsh. He asks Marsh if he ever met Eccles during his time with the church, but Marsh replies that he has never even seen him. Suddenly, a voice booms from above as armed figures appear on the roofs, announcing they are from the church and have received a report of illegal healing. A sinister-looking priest with a tall hat and grim expression leads the Inquisition. Identifying himself as the holy priest Byrne, he commands the people of the slums to point out the filthy unlicensed healer. Byrne screams at the silent crowd, questioning if they dare to disobey God, as the man beside Marsh panics that he might be recognized. The villagers, including the children Marsh has healed, stand together in defiant silence. Priest Burn scans the crowd and smiles menacingly, saying, "I see very well." He lunges forward and violently grabs one of the villagers by the collar. After a moment, he shoves the man away in disgust, yelling that he just stinks. His men then spot a girl with braided hair, and someone calls out her name, Atna. The villagers try to shield Atna from the priest, but are violently pushed aside and told not to get in his way. The girl cries out for her mother as she is cornered. Burn grabs her, tells the crowd to shut up, and begins to sniff her face intently. The old man, Agro, desperately grabs Marsh's arm, begging him to stop and warning that he'll be exposed. Agro pleads that Marsh will be arrested and executed for illegal healing, but Marsh tells him to let go, saying this won't end well. The priest suddenly shrieks with manic glee, "I can smell it now." He declares he smells the holy water on her face, which is proof, as true followers of God would never heal such vulgar people. Burn proclaims the scent is undeniable and demands the culprit be brought to him immediately. The woman who was saved by Marsh earlier watches in terror, wondering what they will do as the priest continues his threats. With eyes full of cold fury, Burn delivers his ultimatum. If they don't comply, this girl will be the first to be hanged for heresy. One of the 6 stars asks FIA if he should accompany her. Soul interrupts, telling FIA and Comet they are being too loud, while Comet retorts that he should do his own job. FIA ignores them, asking if their destination is the slums. The group discusses their mission to secure a factory and workers for the mass production of holy water, identifying the slums as a viable location. Comet scoffs at the Archbishop's obsession with the project, earning a rebuke from Soul, who reminds him to respect their leader. FIA simply asks if Comet has a better solution. He reveals that the prostitutes in town are all talking about a curse that is spreading rapidly, news that seems to surprise FIA. Deciding she must act, FIA announces her departure, telling the others to proceed with their own tasks as she cannot simply wait around. The men watch her go, remarking that the hooligans in the slums are no match for her power, while wondering about the Archbishop's true intentions. His curiosity about the unknown forms of life in this world knows no bounds. Meanwhile, in the slums, a man in a top hat brings a chaotic scene to a halt. His sudden appearance startles the locals. FIA arrives, confronting a group of thugs about an unlicensed healer rumored to be in the area. They respond with hostility, calling her a scammer. One of the locals, Atna, is violently thrown to the ground. A tense standoff ensues between FIA and the thugs. The leader of the group, a man in a top hat, recognizes FIA as a member of the 6 stars and sneers, questioning why she would bother healing in such a squalid place. Face stares him down, coldly asking if her presence would be a problem for them. Thoroughly intimidated, the man declares that they have no further business there and quickly orders his men to leave. A mysterious silver-haired man watches the events unfold from a distance. The people of the slums gather around FIA, thanking her for saving them yet again and expressing their shock that she is one of the famed 6 stars. FIA casually dismisses their gratitude, assuring them that it's no big deal. She then uses her magic to heal a wounded child, her hands glowing with power. The crowd then turns to the silver-haired man they call Marsh-sama, pleading for his help. He calmly agrees to tend to an old woman next. FIA approaches him, calling him out as the unlicensed healer she's been looking for. She invites him for a walk, stating that they have matters to discuss privately. One of the larger villagers moves to intervene, recognizing the man and trying to protect him. But the silver-haired man raises a hand, reassuring the worried crowd that they can trust FIA and that he will be perfectly safe. He accepts her invitation with a charming smile, remarking that a gentleman cannot refuse such a request from a young woman. The villagers watch silently as the two walk away together. Once they are alone on a rooftop, FIA drops the pretense and demands to know his true purpose in sending her to the slums. The man reveals his identity as Sir Eccles. He explains that he orchestrated this meeting to speak with her freely, away from the watchful eyes of the papacy. Then he reveals his other motive: he has a new job for her. Eccles tells FIA that the church is rotting from within and he needs her power to help fix it. FIA is taken aback by his directness, noting that she usually receives her orders through formal documents or second-hand messengers. Back in his hideout, the top-hatted man, Burn, rages about his humiliation at the hands of that 6 stars bitch. His subordinates try to calm their furious leader. Byrne dismisses FIA's interference as a mere whim, insisting that their plan can still proceed. He declares that the real problem is the unknown, fraudulent healer who has appeared in the slums. He scoffs that the 6 stars are just arrogant youngsters seeking attention and that their charity work won't last. A knock at the door announces the arrival of Sir Bakam. The visitor enters, apologizing for intruding on Reverend Byrne. Byrne greets Sir Bakam, complimenting the effectiveness of his unique merchandise. Bakam gets straight to the point, asking for an update on that plan. His eyes gleam with manic greed as he declares that he must possess that prime piece of land. The scene shifts to the now desolate red light district, once a bustling part of the town. Tents now line the streets because the curse has made the brothels unpopular, forcing business outside. A man with distinct facial tattoos explains that the curse has driven away not just the brothels but all other shopkeepers as well, leaving the entire area in ruins. He worries that if the plague continues, the district will become completely abandoned. His companion, Agro, asks him why they are there and if he has spoken to his sis about the curse. The tattooed man replies that he only warned the 6 stars girl to be careful, and that he himself came to heal as many people as he could. He apologizes to Agro for dragging him along, but Agro insists it is not an unreasonable order. The man admits he is worried about his sister. The tattooed man enters a dilapidated building, calling out for someone named Nora and startling her with his sudden entrance. Nora recoils in disgust, demanding to know why her brother is at her brothel. The silver-haired healer named Marsh observes their familiar dynamic while a worker mistakes them for customers. Nora stares in stunned silence, completely flustered by their sudden appearance. A closer look reveals weeping sores around her mouth, a clear sign of a serious illness. The affliction is identified as syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease that progresses in stages, from rashes to growths and can eventually lead to death if left untreated. Her brother urges her to listen to Marsh, pointing out that she was armed because she knew something was deeply wrong. Marsh steps forward, declaring that his first priority is to heal her immediately. He begins a powerful healing chant, as the history of the devastating disease, which killed 5 million in Europe and may have been brought from the Americas by Columbus's crew, flashes through the air. The magic intensifies, targeting the malicious blight on her skin. The swelling instantly vanishes, and Nora realizes with horror that the seemingly minor ailment could have been fatal. To understand the full extent of the curse, Marsh asks if the red rash has appeared on the palms of her hands or the soles of her feet. Nora asks Marsh-san to check her lower body, worried his companion Agro will throw a fit over the impropriety. She explains that the curse began spreading everywhere just a few days after a group of strangers appeared at the border. She admits she regrets ignoring her suspicions about the newcomers, having mistakenly believed she had driven them away. Her brother laments that his lack of money made things worse, as the entire red light district is now branded as a cursed place, leaving them doomed. Nora cuts him off, reminding him that he is the one who always helps her in a fight, often getting hurt worse than she does. She tells him to stop apologizing, insisting she doesn't need his pity because she knows how hard he works. Marsh watches the siblings' heartfelt moment in silence. He then offers a warm smile, reassuring them that it will all be okay. With unwavering determination, he promises to resolve this entire mess himself. The scene shifts to a lavish office, where someone announces their arrival to report. Arch listens to FIA's report, confirming that the situation in the slums is just as she described. He finds it strange that recent fugitive slaves were captured near the slums, rather than hiding within them. She explains that the slaves avoid the slums because they fear being sent back, though she refuses to name them. Arch decides his next move is to inspect the slave peddler Bakam, a known associate of Ecclesama. He is repulsed by the situation, wondering what twisted goal the mastermind could have for spreading a curse around the world. FIA tells him that after her visit, she believes she understands the mastermind's true objective. She points out the strange discrepancy between the booming new town and the intentionally undeveloped slums. She speculates that the developers were deliberately neglecting the area. Arch comes to a horrifying conclusion. The people of the slums were intentionally weakened by the curse to depopulate the area for redevelopment. Faye then reveals the order she received directly from Eccles, to catch the mastermind with Arch's help. Arch agrees to the mission but, noting Eccles' absence, decides to report their findings to Cardinal Sislarp. He then questions FIA about another part of Eccles' order, which instructed them to wait 2 days before making a move. FIA argues that they should act immediately if they want to catch the culprit. But Eccles is shown standing on a high rooftop, revealing that the delay was a deliberate part of his plan. Meanwhile, Sir Bakam storms into Reverend Burns' office for the second time that day, slamming the door behind him. He delivers dire news in a panic. Arch of the Six Stars is coming tomorrow, threatening to derail their entire plan. Bakam interprets this as a warning from Archbishop Eccles himself, whom he knows as a greedy mammonist and the leader of the Six Stars. Burns' panic turns to manic glee as he realizes Eccles must be on their side. Bakam confirms that Eccles has bought them a 2-day delay from the papacy, giving them a window to proceed. One of Burns' men suggests arranging some suspicious deaths in the slums to resolve the issue before Arch arrives. Burn praises the idea but proposes an even simpler solution: eliminate the inspectors to delay the investigation indefinitely. With a wicked grin, he declares they will burn everything to the ground, leaving no evidence and no witnesses. His men stare in terrified silence. Burn proclaims they will cleanse the land with fire, a purification so complete it will render any investigation impossible. His masked enforcers prepare to carry out the order. The conspirators erupt in celebration, cheering Burn's simple and fast solution to defy the Six Stars. Burn graciously credits his talk with Sir Bakam for sparking the brutal idea. Bakam affirms their shared philosophy: they don't sell defective products, so the cursed slaves must be burned before the blight can spread. He offers to bring a special liquid used for burning slaves and prepares to leave. The plan is set for the following day, when they will survey the extent of the blaze. In the quiet streets of the slum, Agro and Nora remain vigilant. Burn gives his final, chilling command, questioning the value of those who think little of life as he orders his men to burn everything down.